I have a suite at the end of the world. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 801 Foreign Legion. 120 billion is definitely not a small amount for the future group. But if the 200 billion is used to forge the key to the universe, then it is just a number. After the space elevator is built, let alone 200 billion, it is even a question whether the future group will use the US dollar for future currency settlement. The Earth's aerospace industry will complete the leap from the Stone Age to the Bronze Age. The cost of entering outer space will even be lower than that of civil airliners. The originally unrealistic space mining will also become a reality. The changes to Earth's civilization can be described as earth-shaking. And all this is achieved with only 120 billion pieces of paper. After leaving the Research Institute of the Aerospace Science and Technology Center, Jiang Chen went to Sun Jiao's office and informed her of the 120 billion space elevator plan. Although Jiang Chen had revealed before that the cost of this project might be quite staggering, Sun Jiao couldn't help but take a breath after hearing the 120 billion. Do you think the company is printing money? Even if many projects make money, it will take time to cash it out, okay? Even if the annual turnover of Future Group exceeds 100 billion and the total profit is close to 60 billion, it will take a year to cash it out. Since its establishment, Future Group has been expanding its business, and each step of expansion requires money. Didn't we open a bank? Facing Sun Jiao's question, Jiang Chen touched his nose and smiled embarrassedly. Hearing this, Sun Jiao sighed helplessly and explained to him patiently. Even if we open a bank, it doesn't mean that the money can be used casually. The space elevator. Just listening to the name, it shouldn't be the kind of project that can recover the investment cost in the short term, right? 120 billion funds are all locked in the same project. This can no longer be described as risky. What about borrowing money from other banks? Have you considered the problem of repaying the money? Of course, I have not only considered the problem of repaying the money, but I have also considered whether the US dollar will still be as valuable as it is now after the space elevator is built. Facing Sun Jiao's questioning, Jiang Chen smiled confidently. After hearing Jiang Chen's words, Sun Jiao opened her mouth dumbly. She was about to ask him why he said that, but as a student of economics, she soon understood the truth. When any currency can monopolize a market, the influence of this currency will radiate to other markets according to the correlation between this market and other markets. To give a simple example, oil settlement must use US dollars, which is one of the reasons why the US dollar has become a hard currency in international trade. For now, no other commodity has a greater impact on other markets than oil. Because no matter what you produce, you have to consume oil to transport it directly or indirectly. If the space elevator is built, it will mean that starring trade will monopolize the gateway to space. Even if starring trade prints its own banknotes and points to those waste papers and says that space trade must be settled with these pieces of paper in the future, governments will have to accept it. After a long time, she squeezed out a sentence from her throat. This is too risky, but we have a great chance of winning. Jiang Chen looked at Sun Jiao and said in a serious tone. The space elevator plan was launched as scheduled. Future Heavy Industry has begun to adjust its production capacity and expand the plant for producing graphene tracks in the Anger Island Industrial Park. The construction plan is to launch the materials into outer space first, and then build a synchronous orbit space station, and then simultaneously start the construction of the space station as a balance hammer, and lay tracks on the ground. After the track is built, there is no need to launch rockets to transport materials to outer space. The materials can be sent directly to space using graphene tracks, which will greatly save the construction cost of the space station. In other words, the 120 billion budget may not be used up in the end. At present, the space elevator base station deployed on the equator has been assembled, and it looks like a flat Rubik's cube from a distance. For safety reasons, Starring Trade has deployed a battalion of troops on it. Many foreign media have already smelled the wind. This future group seems to be preparing to make some big news in the Pacific Ocean, so they have sent the fastest reporters. However, in the face of media inquiries, both Starring Trade and Future Group remained silent and did not mention the purpose of this giant offshore platform. However, combined with Starring Trade's recent frequent space activities, many people have already guessed something, but they are still unwilling to believe it. Space elevator? No matter how you look at it, this is too much. I didn't pay attention to those rumors on the internet because Jiang Chen had more important things to do. He knew that it was a crime to possess a treasure. Although the 5 big gangsters under the framework of the United Nations would not be as barbaric as the powers in the Victorian era, their covetousness for the space elevator would inevitably bring a lot of unnecessary trouble to Starring Trade. Therefore, before the completion of the space elevator, Starring Trade must have the strength to match it. A week after the military exercise, that is, in early June, Starring Trade posted a recruitment advertisement on its official website. Any country, anyone interested in Starring Trade, can download the test program on the application market of the Phantom Helmet and pass the assessment of Starring Trade in the form of a VR game. For those who pass the assessment, Starring Trade will provide free air tickets for them to go to the new country for an interview. If the interview is passed, the applicant will be incorporated into the Foreign Legion and become an employee of Xinhuan Trade. At present, the permanent population of Penglai City has exceeded 500,000, and the total population of Xinguo has exceeded 800,000. As the labor gap is gradually filled, Xinguo has begun to tighten its originally loose immigration policy and the number of labor visas issued. Now it is not as easy to immigrate to Xinguo as it was a year ago. Want to immigrate without money and education? Then go to the army. In line with the conscription policy of Xinhuan Trade, Xinguo promulgated the Foreign Legion Act. Any foreign employee engaged in military-related industries in the country will be able to obtain Xinguo nationality after 3 years of service and become a citizen of Xinguo. Foreign soldiers who have served for 5 years or died during their service can obtain Xinguo nationality for their immediate family members. It is for this reason that when Xinhuan Trade's recruitment advertisement was announced, it received tens of thousands of resumes from all over the world. Many people are not for the salary of a few $1,000s, but just to be able to get the qualification to immigrate. Speaking of immigration, we have to mention an interesting phenomenon. After the completion of Penglai City, the number of immigrants from Europe has been increasing. They are not refugees, but the reason for immigration is more or less because of refugees. Since the EU adopted a high-pressure policy against refugees, the contradictions buried in European society have been completely ignited. From a long-term perspective, this may allow Europe to get rid of the danger of greening in the future, but in the short term it will undoubtedly aggravate social unrest. Terrorist attacks occur every month, and many cities including Paris and Munich have declared a state of emergency. Europe, with high welfare, has been stripped of the hat of an immigrant paradise, and developing countries with good economic growth have become the first choice for European immigrants. Perhaps because Western Europe is relatively cold, the new country, whose territory is distributed on the edge of the equator, is particularly popular with European immigrants. In particular, immigrants from Germany and France have brought a large number of high-tech talents to the new country, including experts in many fields such as electronics industry, robots, and artificial intelligence, which have made a considerable contribution to the development of the new country. Chapter 802. Never a True Ally. The construction of the space elevator is in full swing. Maintaining the rhythm of one rocket a day, the Aerospace Science and Technology Center of Starring Trade has turned the space project into a daily activity, launching 24 tons of objects into outer space every day. The RM-320 engine produced by the industrial-grade 3D printer was transported to the rocket launch site for assembly, almost as soon as it came off the production line. In an interview with the media, the employees of the Aerospace Science and Technology Center even joked that we have successfully turned the aerospace industry into an assembly line. The cost of the Starring series rocket is lower than that of the Falcon 9, with a construction cost of only $10 million. Since the Starring series rocket adopts a two-stage propulsion mode and the first stage rocket can be recycled, the cost of a single launch is only $4 million. That is 2/3 of the Falcon 9 launch vehicle. It is precisely because of this that starring trade can afford this money. However, when Kerwin sent the first phase budget application materials to Jiang Chen's desk, Jiang Chen couldn't help but be amazed. 4 million a day, that's 1.46 billion a year. The cost of transporting materials to outer space for this space elevator is terrifyingly expensive. Although it is a bit expensive, it is worth the money. At the beginning of the year, Jiang Chen had already allocated $50 billion to starring trade. After the development of the space elevator was completed, there was still a surplus of more than 40 billion. The Future Bank borrowed 20 billion, and Jiang Chen borrowed 30 billion from Boston Bank and Morgan Bank respectively, using the shares of the Future Group as collateral, with a repayment period of 5 years and an annual interest rate of 6%. It must be said that the shares of the Future Group are still quite attractive to the American consortium. When Jiang Chen and Rocky first discussed the loan, the old fox was still hesitant, saying that the amount was too large and it was difficult to handle. But when he heard that Jiang Chen was willing to use the shares of the Future Group as collateral, all the troubles were gone. Rocky almost wanted to lend Jiang Chen more money so that when Jiang Chen could not pay it back, he could become the largest shareholder of the Future Group. But after hesitating for a while, Jiang Chen finally did not do so. After all, the two companies are allies, and Jiang Chen would feel a little sorry for pitting them so badly. Therefore, after finding the Boston Consortium, Jiang Chen then found another major shareholder of the Federal Reserve, Morgan Stanley, the leader of the WASP Consortium. When Jiang Chen found Morgan Bank, he also used the same method to offer shares as bait. As he expected, after the other party said that they needed to hold a meeting to discuss, they took the initiative to contact Jiang Chen the next day and said that the 30 billion loan was completely fine. The reason why Morgan Bank and First Boston Bank were so attentive was that they did not believe that Jiang Chen could afford to pay back the money. Through various intelligence research, Future Group wasted a lot of money on aerospace projects. Analysts from Morgan Bank and First Boston Bank agreed that these tens of billions of dollars in loans were very likely to be invested in aerospace projects. As we all know, aerospace projects are a bottomless pit. Even for an outstanding private aviation company like X-Space, more than half of the reason for its profitability is due to orders from NASA and the US Department of Defense. It is impossible to support an aerospace company just by relying on commercial launch projects. Although the economy of New China is growing rapidly, it is still a small country after all. How much of its annual fiscal revenue can be invested in aerospace projects? Relying on the International Space Station supply project outsourced by Russia, you can only make a living. If it is really that profitable, will Russia do it for you? Therefore, Morgan Bank and First Boston Bank both believe that Future Group will never be able to recover its investment costs within 5 years, and Jiang Chen can only repay its debts with equity. But will Jiang Chen let them do it? When the space elevator is completed, it will be the time for Future Group to attack the US dollar. It has been almost 2 weeks since Natasha moved into the villa. After 2 weeks of getting along, Jiang Chen has almost gotten used to this Russian girl who eats and drinks for free. If there is anything that is not used to, it is probably that I can't go home after get off work and have sex with the lovely Aisha in the gym, bathroom, balcony, etc. When I go back to the end of the world to visit Sun Jiao, Yao and others, I have to lock the bedroom door tightly before going. But there is still a chance. After all, Natasha can't stay at home all the time. As a security guard at the embassy, she was not like Jiang Chen, who worked for himself and could work according to his mood and weather. Even if there was a typhoon on Koro Island, she had to go out to the embassy street at 7 o'clock every day. On June 6th, the Kremlin finally got the news and agreed to Jiang Chen's proposal of exchanging people for intelligence. Since the German New Alternative Party came to power, Germany, as Russia's largest economic partner in Europe, immediately changed its original softening attitude towards Russia and became a firm supporter of the Southern Corridor Plan, that is, to expand investment in the natural gas pipeline from Azerbaijan to Europe and seek new sources of natural gas from the south of the Caspian Sea to the Middle East. If the Southern Corridor Plan is successful, it will pry open the European energy map and completely change the situation, where the EU is controlled by Russia on energy issues. This is undoubtedly a heavy blow to Russia. Merkel, whose whereabouts are unknown, is in danger, and former Deputy Prime Minister Evelyn has become Russia's hope. Evelyn himself and his party, the Christian Democratic Union, are also one of the most pro-Russian political parties in Europe. This can be clearly seen from Merkel's series of speeches on agreeing to lift sanctions against Russia and recognizing Crimea's belonging to Russia. Compared with New Zealand, which is tens of thousands of miles away, Moscow, which is closer to Europe, can indeed provide better support to Efrin. So Jiang Chen made the right bet on this point. Efrin is indeed a very important bargaining chip for Russia. On the other hand, the increasingly tense situation in Turkey has really irritated Russia. From the Veli Society in the Ukrainian civil war to the Freemasons personally interfering in the Turkish coup, the Kremlin has finally realized the danger of this organization. Russia needs allies on the issue of Freemasonry, and the new country, which faces the threat from Freemasonry together, is undoubtedly a good choice. A total of 34.7 G of data, recording all the intelligence of the KGB's investigation of Freemasonry from World War II to the present, are all in this USB flash drive. Natasha shook the USB flash drive in her hand at Jiang Chen, and leaned on the sofa with a smile. Do you have to say something as a thank you to me? Unlimited vodka? Although I feel that you have never been polite when you searched my refrigerator. Jiang Chen complained and reached out to take the USB flash drive from Natasha's hand. What is the situation in the Philippines? I heard that the Freemasons sent Colonel Moritz from Europe to serve as a military advisor to the Philippine army. That guy is a tough guy, Natasha said with a smile. Really? Jiang Chen smiled non-committally and put the USB drive into his pocket. It's the same to me. I admire your confidence, but you must not underestimate the enemy, Natasha warned. Also, I heard that you are very close to the American WASP consortium, but I have to remind you not to consider yourself their ally. They may hate Jews, but they don't like people other than Anglo-Saxons much. After hearing this, Jiang Chen laughed out loud. Do you still need to remind me? There are no real allies in international relations. The bottle of Diva vodka you drank last Christmas was given by the head of the Freemasons, the Rothschild family. Chapter 803 Varsity Online. Unite the Russians and the American Anti-Semitic Consortium to kill the Jewish Consortium that occupies the whole of Europe and half of the United States. After the big boss of the Freemasonry is solved, the old Russians will be dragged to clean up the American Anti-Semitic Consortium that once shorted their rubble. In this way, half of the shareholders of the Federal Reserve will go bankrupt. When the space elevator is completed, the future group's plan to snipe the dollar will be much easier. At night, the night is deep. Natasha has gone to bed. After confirming this, Aisha walked into Jiang Chen's study lightly. At this moment, Jiang Chen was sitting at the table, looking through the holographic screen projected by the watch, looking through the information about the Freemasonry that Evelyn had exchanged with Russia. After getting the information about the Freemasonry from Natasha, he scanned all the data into the watch, handed it to Jane to sort it out in different categories, and shared it with all ghost agents who met the authority. In these materials, Jiang Chen unexpectedly saw a lot of incredible secrets, including Kennedy's death, including the Iran-Iraq war. There are shadows of Freemasonry behind them. Just like the Rothschild family is far more than just the Carmen and Lafayette winner is standing on the stage. The strength of Freemasonry hidden behind the world, whether it is what Jiang Chen has seen or what the KGB has investigated, is just the tip of the iceberg. Freemasonry is by no means a simple secret religious organization, but a highly institutionalized organization. However, what surprised Jiang Chen the most was not their great achievements since modern times, but the action program of Freemasonry collected by the KGB. The first step is to establish a world order dominated by Jews. The second step is to reduce the world population plan through vaccines, artificial viruses and genetic weapons, and control the global population within 500 million. The third step is to rule the world, enjoy the world's natural resources with a smaller population, and realize the mythical Garden of Eden. It's just like a novel. Jiang Chen shook his head, reduced the holographic image projected by the watch, and slid his finger to throw it aside. No matter from which angle, this information is a bit too unreliable. However, the KGB also made a note under this intelligence, saying that it was just a guess, based on limited intelligence, not a fact, that could be supported by evidence. However, one thing that Jiang Chen was concerned about was that nearly half a year had passed since NATO launched a military operation codenamed Shipwreck against the Somali warlords who were hiding members of the Black Ship organization. However, until now, NATO has not withdrawn its troops from the infected area. In other words, the military contractors responsible for maintaining local order have not withdrawn their troops from the infected area. Could it be that? Suddenly thinking of a terrible thing, Jiang Chen narrowed his eyes. Asia. Jiang Chen looked at Asia, who had been standing by the table. Send a ghost agent to Somalia to find out who the military contractors who maintain local order are, who the shareholders behind them are, and what else they do in the local area besides enforcing UN laws. Yes. Asia replied softly, turning around and preparing to leave the study. But at this moment, Jiang Chen suddenly called her. Wait a minute. Anything else? Asia turned around and tilted her head in confusion. It's already so late. Let's give the order tomorrow. The moonlight gradually climbed up to the treetops, and the lights in the study were on for a long time, not going out until late at night. The next morning, Evelyn boarded a special plane to Russia and went to Moscow to receive political asylum. Before leaving, he repeatedly thanked Jiang Chen and said that, after he took office, he would definitely make his own contribution to the friendly relations between Germany and new country. Jiang Chen just smiled at the blank check Evelyn wrote to him and didn't take it to heart. To be honest, he didn't think that, before solving the troubles of the Freemasons, the former deputy prime minister had a chance to revive the party and take back the German power from the New Choice Party. From the Munich incident to the New Choice Party coming to power, the Rothschild family had obviously been carefully planned. The current Germany is not the Germany of 2 years ago. The refugee issue has made the public opinion of the whole Europe turn to the right. At this time, if Evelyn wants to overthrow the New Choice Party, he has no chance of winning by election alone. The ghost agents have already gone to Somalia, and Morocco's military modernization is also in full swing. Before the Freemasons play a new card, Jiang Chen can only wait and see how the situation changes. Uncertain troubles should be put aside in advance in order to fill the bottomless pit of the space program. Making money is the bottom line. Recently, Futureman Technology has finally completed the development of Veracity, and it has entered the VR application market with great anticipation. This social software called Veracity will allow users to DIY their own private virtual space and own their own property in the virtual city. In terms of virtual shopping and other functions, Veracity will be linked with Vrastore. When users buy some virtual items, if they are very satisfied with the goods, they can also buy one directly in reality. In addition, Veracity also allows users to make new friends through tasks scattered throughout the city, which can be said to be a magic weapon to meet the social needs of Oticus and Oticus. As expected, Veracity has been well received by users as soon as it was launched. Not all VR users like the fantasy adventure style online games like God Level Continent. The emergence of Veracity can be said to fill the gap in the field of casual games for Futureman Technology, making the entertainment of virtual reality networks more diversified. Although there are games produced by other companies in the VR application market, compared with Futureman Technology, these latecomers are more than a little behind in technology. Moreover, due to factors such as servers, the games developed by these game companies are limited to online connection. However, there are still a number of products with good strength in other game studios. For example, Minecraft, produced by MGS Game Studio, which is affiliated with Microsoft, has performed very well on the VR platform and has not been affected by the pixelated style. Before the emergence of Veracity, Minecraft was a leader in casual games in the VR application market. Yes, before the emergence of Veracity. Even this kind of phenomenon still lost to the brand influence and hard power of Future Group. As of noon today, the data from Future Technology showed that the number of registered users of Veracity has exceeded 50 million, and it is expected to exceed 100 million by the end of the month. When reporting to Jiang Chen in the office, even the usually steady Sun Jiao couldn't help but show some excitement on her face. In just 1 week, the number of users has exceeded 50 million. Such a brilliant achievement is indeed hard not to be proud of. I saw on the news yesterday that a terrorist attack actually happened in Munich, chapter 804, Chicken and the Civil War. If the coup cannot be ended within a day, it will undoubtedly turn into a civil war. More than 2 weeks ago, the Turkish military launched a coup in Istanbul. The F-16 suddenly changed its course while completing a routine flight mission, flew over Istanbul, and fired at the presidential palace with machine guns. However, Erdogan changed his schedule temporarily and was not in the presidential palace, so he was lucky to escape the attack. The rebellious F-16 was immediately locked by the ground air defense system and shot down in the north of Istanbul. After learning that the army had launched a coup, Erdogan immediately convened a meeting of the Supreme Military Committee, excluded the newly established presidential guard that was completely loyal to him after 16 years, arrested the coup participants, and surrounded the headquarters of the 14th Mechanized Brigade suspected of participating in the coup. The 15th Infantry Brigade and the 31st Armored Battalion exchanged fire with the 14th Mechanized Brigade in the western part of Istanbul, forcing it to evacuate in the direction of Samandra, and was annihilated on the way of retreat. At the same time, 4 armored brigades and 2 mechanized brigades stationed in the southwest of Istanbul announced their support for the coup, calling the insurgents in Istanbul their compatriots, and vowed to overthrow the rule of the Erdogan government and promote the secularization process in Turkey. For a time, the spark of the coup ignited the flames of civil war. The two sides engaged in fierce exchanges of fire in southwestern Turkey, and fighter planes and shells flew over cities and towns from time to time. No one expected that the coup would turn into such a fierce civil war. But for some people, all this was expected. At this moment, in the mountainous area of southeastern Turkey, a city called Batman is under the control of the anti-government army. At the airport in the north, a C-5 Galaxy transport plane took advantage of the night to cross the Turkish-Iranian border and landed on the runway with flashing signal lights. The plane stopped steadily, the cabin door opened, and the tank gun barrel pointed directly outside the cabin fiercely, and stopped steadily in the cabin. Several soldiers waiting next to the airport stepped forward and carefully transported the equipment in the cabin out of the transport plane. An officer in desert camouflage uniform came out of the cabin and came to Kalb, the commander of the 22nd Armored Brigade, accompanied by 2 bodyguards. Kalb saluted the officer, who returned the salute, and the two walked to the side of the airport. 3 M1A2 main battle tanks and 40 tons of ammunition supplies. Another 40 M1A2s will be shipped in from the Iraqi border. You must guard this corridor to Iraq, unless you want to lose supplies. Walking next to Kalb, Colonel Botlan from Europe said in a deep voice, "Leave it to me." Kalb nodded solemnly. The soldiers of the 22nd Armored Brigade will never give Batman to the Erdogan government. The size of the Turkish army is the second largest in NATO, but only in terms of size. The tanks of the armored forces are mainly the M60 type from the Cold War, supplemented by the Leopard 1 tanks produced in Germany, and even the M24 Chaffee from World War II in service. There are 2 such antiques in the 22nd Armored Battalion. If the M1A2 helps, the disadvantage of the 22nd Armored Brigade in armored units will undoubtedly be reversed. The secularization of Turkey depends on you. Colonel Botlan patted his shoulder and said solemnly, "If necessary, you can ask the Kurds for help. They are all natural fighters. As long as independence is used as bait, they will not miss this opportunity." After hearing this, Kalb frowned slightly. "Kurds? I don't believe them. If you want to win this war, you must believe them." Looking at the Turkish officer expressionlessly, Colonel Botlan said lightly, "Even if they are pagans, as long as they can be used by us, they are our allies. This is a decision made by the Freemasons. You should understand what I mean." Kalb held his breath. He certainly understood what Colonel Botlan meant. If this was a decision made by the Freemasons, then he, a mere brigade commander of the rebels, certainly had no right to intervene. In addition, volunteers from Europe will join this war. At that time, our people will enter from the Iraqi border with American equipment. The US position will be embarrassing, or the Hillary administration will be embarrassed. NATO fighters will not help Turkey bomb its own people, even if they are its own criminals. Do you understand what I mean? Kalb swallowed and nodded. "I understand. That's good to understand," Botlan said simply, then adjusted his hat and looked in the direction of the C-5 transport plane. The soldiers of the 22nd Brigade have completed the unloading work. In the open space not far away, the tankers are testing the equipment. Tomorrow, these 3 M102s will appear on the front line of the exchange of fire and become the nightmare of the 27th Armored Brigade on the opposite side. In the distance, tracer bullets were flying in the air, and artillery fire dotted the night sky with unnatural purple and red. Kolb looked in that direction. He suddenly felt that the sky was like the future of the Ottoman Empire, and it was impossible to see the direction in the darkness. Last night, the 22nd Armored Brigade stationed in the Bakuman area launched a counterattack against the offensive of the 27th and 29th Armored Battalions of Turkey. Previously, the outside world believed that the 22nd Armored Battalion had run out of supplies and was no longer able to resist the encirclement and suppression of the Turkish government forces. However, this counterattack surprised the outside world. Not only did the 22nd Armored Brigade not show any signs of decline, it even used M102 main battle tanks in its armored battalions. Erdogan strongly condemned the appearance of American equipment in the hands of the rebels and called it a betrayal. The White House said that, although the tanks were American equipment, they did not come from the United States. Hillary visited Istanbul yesterday and held talks with Erdogan in an attempt to appease the Turkish side. Some analysts say that the Turkish coup may put the United States in a dilemma. BBC News, reporting for you. In the morning, Jiang Chen turned on the international news channel as usual. While enjoying the food brought by Asia, he watched the excitement in the international community. Natasha came over with her own portion and sat next to Jiang Chen, opposite Asia. Is it interesting to read these news? Of course it's interesting. Jiang Chen smiled and used a fork to separate the fried eggs, poked the delicate yolk, and spread it evenly on the bread slices. Someone once told me that Obama and Hillary both belong to the Democratic Party, but the former belongs to the Jewish Consortium, and the latter belongs to the anti-Jewish Consortium. The KGB had obviously heard of this news. Natasha's expression did not show any surprise, but instead she pursed her red lips slightly and joked teasingly. Your way of eating is a little different. I think so too. After all, the use of forks is not as rich as chopsticks. Occasionally I will try different ways of eating. Aisha, can you pass me the honey? Yes. Aisha bit the bread between her lips, put down the fork, and passed the honey jar to Jiang Chen with her right hand. On TV, the report about Turkey has ended, and the next broadcast is a news flash. In the screen, the image of Ricity, the latest launch of Futureman technology, flashed. At this time, Jiang Chen spoke. Do you have anything to say to me? Why do you think I have something to say? Natasha looked at Jiang Chen curiously. Because it's already 8 o'clock. Jiang Chen smiled and pointed to the clock on the wall. If I remember correctly, you should go out to work at 7 o'clock. After being pointed out by Jiang Chen, Natasha no longer concealed it and put down the knife and fork in her hand. Yes, I do have something to discuss with you. Are you interested in selling your drones to Russia? Chapter 805 Arms Sales to Russia. As expected, Jiang Chen had expected that when Starring Trade displayed the Hummingbird UAV in the joint military exercise between Singapore and Malaysia, some people would definitely be interested in this flexible support equipment. Flexible mobility and highly intelligent battlefield response capabilities are simply the nightmare of all soft targets. In fact, not only Singapore, but also the US Navy SEALs and Russia's Alpha Special Forces are equipped with similar individual UAVs. However, the four-rotor structure of the UAV is obviously not comparable to the air-powered Hummingbird. The Hummingbird UAV is not for sale. Jiang Chen said without hesitation. It is impossible to sell it. Future military industry will only complete the orders of Starring Trade. I'm afraid that this will disappoint you. I expected you to say that. Natasha shrugged, so I didn't plan to ask about the Hummingbird UAV. What do you mean? Jiang Chen looked at her and asked with a smile. Beta 3 UAV, that is, the UAV logistics network you laid in Jiang City. We are very interested. Natasha said. The logistics market in Russia is not well developed. We don't plan to use Beta 3 for logistics. Natasha stared at Jiang Chen with a sharp gaze. It's not just express delivery that needs logistics. Beta 3's all-terrain transportation capabilities can fully play its value on the front line. For example, delivering ammunition and supplies to the soldiers deployed on the front line. After pondering for a moment, Jiang Chen sighed sincerely. The person who came up with this idea is simply a genius. To be honest, Jiang Chen sometimes feels very puzzled. Every time he takes out the black technology of NB, there are always people who are not tired of digging deep into its military value for him. He has never considered using the drone logistics network for frontline supplies. But then again, using Beta 3 drones for supplies is really not very meaningful for the soldiers of starring trade. Because of the existence of mechanical exoskeletons, each soldier can carry more than 3 to 5 times the weight of the army of other countries. And with the breakthrough speed of the soldiers of starring trade, basically no need to carry out a supply. They can fight a local battle. You name a price. Natasha said with a smile. Mount the drone terminal on the infantry vehicle, use the drone to supply the soldiers in scattered operations, and when necessary, you can also tie explosives to the opposite side and rush to their faces. TSK, this method is indeed feasible. Jiang Chen touched his chin and thought about this problem seriously. The load capacity of Beta 3 is about 2 to 3 kilograms. Through technical upgrades, at the expense of the activity radius, it should be no problem to increase its load capacity to 5 kilograms. As for those large Beta drone control terminals deployed in the express delivery outlets in Jiang City, it is technically feasible to reduce them to small vehicle mounted terminals that can simultaneously control 10 to 20 drones. $500,000, 20 drones and matching vehicle mounted drone terminals. Jiang Chen said. After hearing Jiang Chen's offer, Natasha's eyebrows jumped, and she coughed and laughed. This quote is a bit too expensive. I remember that the cost of laying a drone logistics network in Jiang City was more than $200 million, and a total of 50,000 drones were invested, and the average price of a drone was only $4,000, $500,000. For 20 drones, why don't you go and grab it? It's $500,000 for 20 drones and the supporting terminals. Jiang Chen emphasized the word terminal, looked at Natasha calmly, and then said, the price of the terminal is much more expensive than the drone itself. After all, not just any computer can provide data processing services for drones. Can't it be cheaper? Natasha pretended to be pitiful, but Jiang Chen insisted on the price he offered. No. We have to design a portable Beta drone terminal specifically for you. It really can't be any cheaper. Jiang Chen shook his head repeatedly. Of course it can be cheaper, but if it's cheaper, how can I make money? The cost of 20 drones and terminals is only $100,000, but since it is exported, and it is a monopoly business, how can I not rip you off? After some bargaining, Jiang Chen finally reluctantly agreed to a 10% discount and set the price of this device at $450,000 per set. Natasha would bring the specific agreement back after get off work. Before going to work, she repeatedly nagged Jiang Chen not to suddenly change his mind. Jiang Chen forced himself to send her out the door. After she left, he finally couldn't help laughing. This future man military industry has been established for less than a month, and it has received overseas orders $450,000 per set. He can make $350,000 after deducting the cost. Even if 1/10 of the Russian tanks, infantry vehicles, and military off-road vehicles are replaced with advanced drone supply systems, there will be a profit of more than $3.5 billion. How can Jiang Chen not be happy? Considering that this arms business is too profitable, Jiang Chen secretly made up his mind to contact the Liu family in China and ask them if they are interested in this Beta drone supply system. Compared with the impoverished Russian bear, the rabbit is the rich sponsor. Anyway, the international influence of Future Group has made him no longer have to worry about the arms business. After deciding on this matter, Jiang Chen accompanied Aisha to clean up the dishes, and then went out to the Future building. After returning from get off work, Natasha put a military purchase contract in front of him, and watched him sign his name with a smile. She helped the Russian Ministry of Defense save a lot of money, and she was praised by her boss. However, the caring tone of her boss made her a little angry, as if she had sold her body to convince Jiang Chen to give her a 10% discount. After signing the contract, Jiang Chen went to the study as usual and called Liu's house. After listening to Jiang Chen's words, Liu Xiangguo immediately expressed great interest. But after all, he was not a member of the military system, so he couldn't make a hasty decision on this matter. After telling Jiang Chen that he would study this matter, the old fox hung up the phone. Today, drones brought him a lot of good news. However, at this time, the ghost agent brought him bad news. The United States is currently developing a vehicle-mounted anti-drone equipment, which is currently being bid by two arms companies. Raytheon's design is to lock and destroy approaching drone targets through directed energy weapons, which is similar to a simplified version of the laser anti-missile system in the experiment. Lockheed Martin's design is to block the communication between drones and terminals in the target area through directional full-channel interference technology, and set up a drone no-fly zone. Asia reported to Jiang Chen the intelligence collected by the US agents. Jiang Chen was not surprised after hearing this information. After the birth of any weapon, there will inevitably be people who think about how to restrain this weapon. Raytheon's plan is costly, but it is undoubtedly the most effective, because the anti-drone equipment in the end of the world basically relies on faster and more accurate directed energy weapons, as well as regional length weapons, that are not available in the world. As for the latter, Lockheed Martin, it uses a currently commonly used anti-drone means in the world, but it is not effective for the Hummingbird and Beta series drones. Although they rely on terminals for data processing and remote control, both the Hummingbird and Beta drones have built-in AI programs. Even when offline, they can complete preset tasks and return according to the preset route. This full-channel jamming technology of Lockheed Martin is at most a flash bomb. Although it can cause some trouble to the drones of starring trade, it cannot completely make them lose their combat effectiveness. And if you are jamming the radio, can't we just make an anti-radio jammer? In front of the station in the end of the world, anti-radio jamming is a basic equipment for electronic warfare. Personally, Jiang Chen still hopes that Lockheed Martin can win the bid. So Jiang Chen couldn't help but wonder, should he give them a hand? Recommend a new book written by a friend, Li Huahuo's Indulgent Life Chapter 806, Fooling the Pentagon. Arlington County, Virginia, southwest of Washington, D.C., is home to the world's largest single office building, the Pentagon. It is the heart of the US Navy, Army, and Air Force, and it coordinates the operation of 1,245 military bases around the world. At this moment, in a spacious office, Shid Wiesjaba, director of the Department of Defense's Acquisition and Procurement Policy Bureau, was facing two documents on his desk, tapping the table with his fingers with a frown. Singapore's large-scale deployment of intelligent single-soldier drones and the performance of Hummingbird drones in military exercises have attracted the attention of the US Department of Defense. The US Secretary of Defense came to talk to him a week ago, hoping that he would contact arms companies that have a cooperative relationship with the military to bid for the production of a single-soldier weapon similar to the Hummingbird drone, as well as equipment that can effectively counter such drones. This equipment is best to be easy to carry and adapt to all terrains, especially urban terrains where drones have the greatest space. There are two companies participating in the bidding, one is Raytheon and the other is Lockheed Martin. The two arms companies are both well known. The former is controlled by the Boston Consortium, while the latter belongs to the California Consortium. One is expensive but highly reliable, while the other is cheap, but has many uncertainties. But in the final analysis, they still have no way of knowing whether the Hummingbird UAV will lose its function due to radio interference. Just then, his secretary walked across a row of desks to his side and placed a newspaper on his desk. Ziyad looked at the secretary in confusion, picked up the Washington Morning Post, and frowned slightly at the report with emphasis. When the Russian side negotiated arms trade with Future Heavy Industry, it chose the Beta 3B military supply drone instead of the Hummingbird UAV that could support infantry frontline operations. According to an unnamed insider, the reason why the Russian side cancelled the purchase plan of the Hummingbird UAV was because the Hummingbird UAV had a loophole in security. When we tested the combat performance of the Hummingbird UAV, we found that the Hummingbird was not as powerful as we imagined. At least when facing anti-drone guns, its performance was extremely clumsy. Anti-drone guns, strictly speaking, are not a type of firearm, but a type of wave-guided weapon that can be carried by a single soldier. This kind of thing is being studied by all countries. As early as a few years ago, the West Point Military Academy developed a special anti-drone gun, which successfully forced to land in front of the then Secretary of Defense. And the cost was only $150. In principle, Lockheed Martin's design is similar to this anti-drone gun. It also uses wave-guided interference technology, but the latter has a wider interference area and a stronger interference effect. Seeing this report, Ziad jumped up immediately. Contact the people at Lockheed Martin. The Department of Defense needs a more detailed design plan with a unit price for the equipment. Ask them to prepare it within 3 days. I need to discuss it with officials from other departments. Yes. His secretary nodded and immediately turned and left. Looking at the newspaper, Ziad rubbed his fingers happily. Hummingbird drone, right? Then the name of our military development project will be catching bees? No. It's catching flies. Let's see how your hummingbirds will run around like headless flies under our anti-UAV equipment. Lockheed Martin won the bid, and the project code is catching flies. When Aisha told Jiang Chen the news, Jiang Chen was so happy that he stood up from his chair, hugged her and kissed her hard. What, Russia cancelled the purchase of hummingbird drones? Starring Trade had no intention of selling them from the beginning. As for the so-called someone who wishes to remain anonymous, it was a play played by the Russian side in cooperation with Starring Trade. The price of this play is to supply Russia with 5 drone terminals and matching Beta 3B drones for free. It's only $1.75 million, which Jiang Chen can still afford. Letting go of Aisha, whose cheeks were blushing, Jiang Chen walked back and forth in the study several times, waving his fist excitedly. If Lockheed Martin wins the bid, the Philippine Army will most likely become its first buyer. If the Philippines tears up the ceasefire agreement, the so-called anti-UAV equipment our soldiers will face on the battlefield will not be as good as a water gun. Lockheed Martin cannot get a sample of the Hummingbird UAV, so it can only use the beta series of UAVs that have already circulated on the market as a target for testing weapons. There is no doubt that the beta series of civilian UAVs developed on the basis of modern UAVs will definitely be affected by this weapon. However, I'm very sorry, the Hummingbird UAV uses a completely different technology from the beta series of UAVs. In the afternoon, Jiang Chen went to Anger Island. The task he assigned to Zhang Wenyi, the director of the Anger Island Industrial Park, is already being implemented. After the separation of Future Man Military Industry from Future Man Heavy Industry, it will help Future Man Heavy Industry to better participate in the international market, and at the same time, make military production specialized, which can be said to have many benefits. 4 square kilometers of land next to it have been included in the scope of the park. At present, a Hummingbird UAV assembly plant and a small Vortex engine production plant have been built. According to the production plan presented to him by Zhang Wenyi, a series of arsenals such as armored vehicle and tank assembly plants will be added here in the future. The CEO of the newly established subsidiary Future Man Military Industry is named Ling Tao, a native of Koro Island. Jiang Chen gave him only one task, which was to strive to make even a button on a soldier's uniform, completed by a factory in the new country. Any projects involving the Starring Trade Army that were once outsourced to overseas companies must be brought back to China. After inspecting the factory on Anger Island, Jiang Chen was about to return to the Future Man building, but at this moment, President Zhang Yaping called. After answering the call, Jiang Chen saw that the Bluetooth headset was hanging on his ear. Hello. What's the matter? Are you free now? Come. Forget it. I'll go to your place. No, I'm outside. I'll stop by the presidential palace later. Is there anything troublesome? Jiang Chen noticed that the president's voice was a little tired. It's not a troublesome thing, just a small problem. Well, it may not be clear over the phone. Let's talk about it when you come over. Zhang Yaping said. Okay, about half an hour. Zhang Yaping called Jiang Chen's private cell phone. The two of them took a normal route to talk, so it was not convenient to talk about important things. After learning this, Jiang Chen hung up the phone and asked Aisha to drive the car to the pier. Before going to the future building, he planned to listen to what kind of trouble the president of the new country had encountered. Chapter 807 Inquiry from the Outer Space Agency. I have received at least 13 protests this month. from private companies, countries, and the United Nations. Zhang Yaping threw a stack of documents on the coffee table, sighed, and sat on the sofa opposite Jiang Chen. About the space activities of Starring Trade. What are the reasons for their protest? Unlike Zhang Yaping's headache, Jiang Chen leaned on the sofa and asked with a smile. Orbital issue. Zhang Yaping said, they believe that the projects carried out by Starring Trade in the synchronous orbit have seriously threatened the satellites in the synchronous orbit. The circumference of the synchronous orbit is more than 220,000 kilometers. I think such protests are purely unreasonable. The legal area we enjoy in the outer space orbit must be at least equivalent to our land area, including our territorial waters. Jiang Chen said nonchalantly. I think so, and that's what I replied to the protesters. Zhang Yaping sighed, but the inquiry letter from the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs is a bit troublesome. They are worried that our construction site will eventually become space junk due to malfunctions, leading to serious accidents. The Office for Outer Space Affairs hopes that we can at least explain the content of the project to eliminate the concerns of various governments. The slender secretary came over, made a cup of Blue Mountain coffee for the two of them, and then left the presidential office very sensibly. When the office was occupied by two people again, Jiang Chen smiled and moved closer to the coffee table, lowering his voice. Do you want me to teach you how to do it? I'd like to hear more about it. Zhang Yaping spread his hands helplessly. In one word, delay. Delay. Yes, delay. Jiang Chen smiled and picked up the coffee cup, took a sip. On the one hand, he said he would cooperate with the investigation, and on the other hand, he used various policies and regulations to block their procedures. The procedures of the United Nations are based on annual cycles. If you delay it for 1 or 2 years, our people will be busy in space. Only 1 or 2 years. Zhang Yaping looked at Jiang Chen with a little surprise. As the president of New China, he was one of the insiders of the space elevator plan. From the details of the project that Jiang Chen revealed to him, it didn't look like a project that could be completed in 1 or 2 years. Jiang Chen put down the empty coffee cup, raised 2 fingers, and said with a smile, at most 2 years. In 2 years, our elevator will be completed, and then we will dominate the new international order. You just need to cooperate with me and wait quietly for this most critical period. After receiving a positive response from President Zhang Yaping, Jiang Chen left the New China presidential palace with a satisfied smile. The next day, New China replied to the United Nations that it would cooperate with the United Nations investigation procedures and prepare relevant procedures for the observers of the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs. According to a series of laws in New Zealand, it takes 2 working months to prepare these procedures. That's right, it's 2 working months, not working days. New Zealand's efficiency surprised the people of the United Nations, or the Americans. After arriving in New Zealand, these UN observers were completely unable to start their work because the procedures were not in place. As for 2 months later, Starring Trade will prepare 2 trucks of documents for these observers to review slowly. Putting aside the turmoil caused by the construction in outer space, the matter that Jiang Chen asked Asia to investigate last time has already yielded results. According to the report of the ghost agent who went to Somalia, the military contractor responsible for maintaining order in the Beledweyne region of Somalia is the Arrowhead Private Military Advisor Company registered on the island of Madagascar. It turned out to be an old enemy. This is not the first time Jiang Chen has heard the name Arrowhead Company. From the earliest attempted kidnapping incident on Koro Island to the attack in Antarctica, they were all done by this private military contractor registered in the southern African island country. There is no need to investigate the shareholders behind it. There is already solid evidence to prove that this company is a pawn of the Freemasons. As early as a kidnapping incident that was nominally hired by the Philippines, the new country had protested to the Republic of Madagascar through diplomatic channels. However, the response was quite perfunctory. Both the local government and the central government took shelter for the Arrow Military Company. Just as Starring Trade controls the order of the new country, the Arrow Company also controls the economy and politics of the Republic of Madagascar by exchanging interests. As one of the least developed regions in the world, the Rothschild family has obviously bought this place. considering the avoidance of complications. Starring Trade did not pursue its subsequent responsibilities, but only punished the Philippines, the employer. Looking back on this matter now, it seems that it is not as simple as it seems on the surface. As early as that time, the Freemasons had set their sights on Jiang Chen, but Jiang Chen did not realize this at the time, and simply characterized the kidnapping incident as a revenge by the Philippines. What are they doing? Jiang Chen asked Asia, while sitting at the desk in the study. Ken's Pharmaceuticals. This company invested $5 million in Beledweyne to set up a pharmaceutical factory to produce penicillin, hepatitis B vaccine and other drugs needed by Somali refugees, and assist the United Nations in humanitarian relief. But we found something else in their pharmaceutical factory. Asia, who was standing in front of the desk, stretched out her hand and waved it above the desk, switching the picture on the holographic screen. It was a warehouse, and from the height, it should have been taken by a drone. In the yard of the warehouse, you can see white people wearing sanitary suits and security guards wearing bulletproof vests. Not far from the door, there are several Somali blacks squatting. They seem to be waiting for something. What is this? Jiang Chen frowned slightly. The warehouse of Ken's Pharmaceuticals is in Beledweyne, but after our investigation, we found that it is a laboratory. In addition, our people searched the archives of the Somali Ministry of Commerce and found that this laboratory was not registered. Aisha stretched out her hand to switch to the next picture. This is a picture taken by our drone after approaching. In the picture, Ken's Pharmaceuticals researchers are testing the blood of these experimenters. Then what? After our investigation, these participants in the experiment have one thing in common. Aisha looked at Jiang Chen and said in a positive tone, they are all survivors of the TT virus outbreak area. Are they researching a vaccine for the TT virus? No. We should have already researched this thing. Jiang Chen frowned. On April 13th, a special device was unloaded from the Mogadishu port in Somalia and registered with the customs. When our agents tracked down this device, they found that it was a gene sequencing device made in Germany. Gene sequencing of T-series virus immune people. Jiang Chen's fingers tapped lightly on the table. The study was quiet. Aisha turned off the holographic screen and stood aside, quietly waiting for Jiang Chen's instructions. After a long while, Jiang Chen spoke. Keep an eye on them, and try to get their research results without attracting their attention. I want to know, what exactly do the Freemasons want to do? Chapter 808 Astronaut Training Center. On the southern coast of Anger Island, there is a special astronaut training center. The 700-acre area occupies a corner sea cliff at the southernmost end of Anger Island. 1/3 of the facilities are located on the road, while 2/3 of the facilities are located in the sea. The graphene interlayer has circled a water tank covering more than 400 acres on the sea. The seawater in this water tank has no liquid exchange with the outside seawater, and the interior is divided into 2 blocks by the graphene interlayer. By changing the salt content of the partitioned seawater, the buoyancy of the seawater can be offset by gravity to simulate the weightless environment in space and the low-gravity environment on the surface of the moon. Underwater construction includes simulated space stations, space living areas, experimental cabins, core cabins, etc. The training program covers a total of 437 space activities, from spacewalks to core cabin work, to operating workboats to complete the recovery of space debris. Among them, 103 projects are open to the public, and both Singapore citizens and foreign tourists can enter to experience, while the remaining 335 projects have a certain degree of confidentiality, and only trained staff can participate. The venue is open to the public for free on Saturdays and Sundays. In addition to parents bringing their children here to play, there are also social practice activities organized by public schools, which only charge a small ticket fee for admission. It is not only open to locals. Tourists visiting Singapore can also experience the feeling of weightlessness by paying an entrance fee of $100 and entering with a tourist passport. However, considering the expensive price of spacesuits, only trained staff can wear them. Other tourists can only use simulated spacesuits to experience the space environment. The entire training center has a total investment of $2.5 billion. As one of the starring trade space programs, it was funded by the Space Elevator Project Department and can accommodate up to 8,000 tourists and trainers at the same time. In terms of scale and openness, this is undoubtedly the world's largest aerospace training center. Future Group has turned the aerospace industry from a private project into a national project. In addition to throwing a lot of money into the bottomless pit of space, it has also introduced a series of policies to stimulate the development of the aerospace industry through its influence in the political circles of Singapore. For example, the aerospace industry is tax-free, and the aerospace volunteer immigration policy. If we say which country in the world has the highest proportion of astronauts, it must be Singapore in a few years. Liu Qingpeng from Fujian, China, is one of the beneficiaries of the aerospace volunteer immigration policy. 3 months ago, when he was still working in Fujian, he saw a special advertisement in the news pushed by Future Man 1.0. Starring Trade announces a lunar colonization plan and recruits volunteers from all over the world. This advertisement reminded him of the Mars colonization plan announced by SpaceX a few years ago. In the next 15 to 20 years, SpaceX plans to send 80,000 volunteers to Mars for colonization, and the volunteers will live a self-sufficient life on Mars. It sounds very fantasy. After all, the lunar colonization, which is so close, has not been completed, let alone Mars, which is 55 million kilometers away from the Earth. According to the plan issued by SpaceX, each volunteer needs to raise $500,000 for travel expenses. Rather than saying that this is a Mars colonization plan, it is better to say that it is a unique crowdfunding. However, this advertisement of starring Trade made his eyes glued to the screen, unable to move away. All volunteers only need to sign a safety agreement and voluntarily dedicate themselves to the aerospace industry to participate in the aerospace project. All project participants can go to the embassy to apply for a special work visa to enter the country and join our cause after passing the registration on the official website. After arriving in Singapore, the accommodation and meals of the volunteers will be provided by Starring Trade. The training time is 8 hours a day, of which 4 hours will be completed at the Starring Astronaut Training Center. The remaining 4 hours can be trained during sleep time through the Phantom helmet. The rest of the time can be arranged by the volunteers themselves. The training time can be arranged by the volunteers and the instructors after consultation, and the training venue will be open all day. In addition to providing food and accommodation, Starring Trade will also provide volunteers with a minimum monthly salary of $400. After working for 1 year, the work visa can be changed to an immigrant visa, and the salary will be increased to $600-3,000 depending on the type of work. Note, if the contract is terminated for reason midway, the visa of the terminator will be revoked, and he will be deported back to his country. If the volunteer unilaterally terminates the contract after becoming a regular employee, he or she will be fined. The company will decide whether to pursue further liability for breach of contract depending on the severity of the circumstances. The first colonization plan is confirmed to be the moon. The probe of Starring Trade has already set off to explore lunar geological information and find large-scale reservoirs of lunar ice. The first step in human colonization of space. We look forward to your joining. To be honest, after reading this advertisement, Liu Qingpeng was tempted. The monthly salary of $400 is indeed very low. After all, this is for volunteers, not regular employees. What really tempted him was the work visa to the new country and the qualification to become a regular immigrant after 1 year. Since the completion of Penglai City, the new country has tightened its immigration policy. Now it is not as easy to get a green card in the new country as before. The labor market is approaching saturation. In addition to the shortage of high-tech talents, the country can provide workers with a high school degree or below. The new government will of course give priority to satisfying the employment problems of its own people. Originally, Liu planned to work in Fujian to save some money, and then get a work visa, and immigrate to the new country. In the end, he was still a step too late. When he applied for a visa, the embassy staff gave him 2 options, either to join the Starring Trade Army or to provide proof of graduate education or above. This result really made him laugh and cry. He couldn't bear the hardship of being a soldier, and if he had a higher education, he wouldn't work in a factory. If he couldn't meet these two conditions, he could only say goodbye to the beautiful Koro Island. However, now, a brand new opportunity was in front of him. As long as he signed up for the moon colonization plan of starring trade, he would be able to get the opportunity to immigrate to a new country as a space volunteer. Although he always felt a little uneasy about immigrating to the moon, who knew how many years it would take for the colonization plan to be implemented? He could be converted to a regular employee after working for 1 year, and he could take 4 hours out for training at night and work part-time during the day. It would be no problem to earn $3,000 or $4,000 a month. Moreover, starring trade also provided food and accommodation, so he could save all the money he earned. After making up his mind, he immediately filled in the information on the official website of starring trade and applied for the qualification of a volunteer. But just as he closed the official website page, his eyes inadvertently swept across the statistical column of the number of applicants in the upper right corner of the screen. Registration number 4,305,123. When Liu Qingpeng saw this number, he took a deep breath and his excitement suddenly cooled down. With so many people registering, will I really be selected? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 809, Acquisition Obstructed. 3 days later, the number of applicants exceeded 10 million. Immigrants without any threshold were first welcomed by the poor people in Africa and the Middle East. Those who had more or less access to the internet and longed for a better life in the outside world were particularly enthusiastic when they signed up. However, Jiang Chen obviously failed to live up to their expectations. For volunteers from backward areas, Xinhuan trade was extremely cautious. Almost no applicants from Africa were selected, and few people from the Middle East were qualified for interviews. It was not because of racial discrimination, but entirely due to considerations of public security and other factors. Living habits, religious customs, and even food culture, all of these may bring hidden dangers to colonization. In order to reduce the risks in this regard, any applicant who takes a negative opinion on secularization will not be eligible for an interview. After the interview results came out, Liu Qingpeng couldn't even believe it himself. He was successfully selected with only a high school education! Happiness came too suddenly. He excitedly took a few good friends in the factory out for a drink that day. The next day, he resigned from the person in charge of the factory and then took his identity information to the new embassy and got a work visa to Koro Island. Dragging his suitcase, he got off the plane at the airport on Koro Island, and soon he saw the minibus responsible for picking up the volunteers. Most of the people on the minibus were yellow people, and there were even his fellow villagers. There were also many people from Europe, the United States, and Russia sitting on the bus, but because of the language barrier, he just looked at these foreign devils curiously and did not communicate with them too much. The minibus drove onto a ferry, and then the ferry drove to Anger Island, and then the minibus took them to the volunteer community next to the training center. From now on, they will live here, receiving 4 hours of on-site training and 4 hours of VR training every day. After 6 months, they will be divided into different types of work for specialized training, based on their performance in training. After a year, their status will be changed from temporary workers to regular workers. Although they are still volunteers, they can be regarded as quasi-astronauts. The construction of the space elevator will be carried out simultaneously with the lunar colonization plan. 1 year later, starring trade will select 200 people from these volunteers as the first batch of colonists to the moon, taking the first step of this shocking interstellar colonization. After the completion of the space elevator, a large number of astronauts will be needed in the space station. The construction of this astronaut training center began long before the space elevator project was launched. On the one hand, it is to provide space station staff to starring trade, and on the other hand, it is to provide basic aerospace training to the citizens of new country, at least to the extent of adapting to the zero-gravity environment. Currently, 30,000 volunteers have arrived in new country for training. Although it has cooperated with Future Travel, the entire aerospace training center is still in a loss. According to the estimate of the finance department, the deficit of the aerospace training center this month is about 8 million to 10 million US dollars. Lose 100 million in a year. When Jiang Chen heard Xiao's report, his expression did not change much. The aerospace project is a bottomless pit. He has long been prepared to lose money in the early stage. More than 100 billion has been lost. Will he still care about this mere 100 million? The budget of the training center remains unchanged, but let Wei Yun think of ways to make the aerospace training center more useful in tourism. It doesn't require self-financing, but it doesn't require too much loss. I don't have any other requirements. I'll tell him. Xiao nodded. Also, how is the negotiation with Australia's Sunrise going? Putting aside the issue of astronaut training, Jiang Chen asked about another issue he was concerned about, which was the food supply for the future space elevator space station and lunar colony base. Sunrise rejected our proposal to acquire farms in northern Australia, even though we offered an 11% premium. According to the person in charge of negotiating with us at Sunrise, this decision was made by the parent company Cargill of the United States. As we all know, 80% of the global food market is controlled by the four major companies ABCD. These four companies are ADM, Bunge, Cargill, and Louis Dreyfus of France. It can be said that the global food price is basically determined by these four companies. It is not difficult for those who are interested to find that three of these companies belong to the United States. It can be said that the global food market is basically under the control of the United States. Although the United States has never announced that the food market must be settled in US dollars, the rice in the bowls of people around the world has never left the control of the United States. In the soybean crisis in 2004, Chinese crushing companies collectively collapsed. The Americans gave the Chinese, who had just joined the WTO for less than 3 years, a painful trade lesson. Until today, more than 10 years later, China's soybean planting industry has not recovered from the crisis of that year. You know, before 2004, China was one of the major soybean producing countries. Now is no longer the barbaric Victorian era. The battlefield between countries has long been no longer based on real swords and guns. By using the invisible lever of the market, even nuclear weapons can do things that cannot be done. Whether it is an orbital space station or a lunar base, the only industry that is difficult to achieve self-sufficiency is food production. Even if it is achieved by hydroponics and aeroponics, it is difficult to control its high production costs. With the space elevator, the cost of transporting food to outer space will be greatly reduced, but it is still difficult to get rid of the control of the four companies ABCD from the source. At present, Singapore's food is basically dependent on imports from Australia. If Jiang Chen takes action against the US dollar, the United States will undoubtedly hit Singapore in the food market. Singapore, which relies entirely on imports for the production of everything from grains to dairy products, is completely defenseless in the food market. There is only one way to minimize the price fluctuations in the international market, and that is to produce it yourself and turn from an importing country into an exporting country. Even if the rice is not grown on the land of Koro Island, it must be grown from overseas farms controlled by local companies in New Zealand. Achieving self-sufficiency in food production is crucial for the future development of starring trade. So Jiang Chen instructed Xiao to propose an asset acquisition plan to Sunrise, which monopolizes Australia's grain exports, hoping to acquire 400,000 acres of farms in northern Australia from it. Unfortunately, Cargill of the United States, which controls Sunrise, is unwilling to give up the farms in its hands. Although the 400,000 acres of farms only account for a small part of the arable land held by Sunrise. What about contacting Cargill of the United States? They don't want to talk at all. Xiao shook her head. My suggestion is to register a subsidiary in Australia and purchase farms from Australian farmers through the subsidiary. Although the cost and efficiency of doing so are not proportional, it is definitely much easier than pulling teeth out of a tiger's mouth. As one of the granaries of Asia, the Australian agricultural product market is quite mature, and no farmer would be willing to sell their farms. After all, many Australian farmers have made a living from this for generations, and they can't find other jobs if they lose their farms. Unless the future group offers a very high premium, they will not nod their heads at all. Jiang Chen was also in a dilemma for a while. New country is a good place in every way, but the area is a little small. When he chose the base at that time, he didn't think so far ahead, thinking that the economy is globalized anyway, and he can buy anything he needs with money. However, when the plate is bigger now, he found that things are far from as simple as he imagined. It's really annoying. If only thousands of square kilometers of territorial waters could be exchanged for land. Wait. Thinking of this, Jiang Chen's eyes suddenly lit up. Wouldn't it be enough to build a farm on the sea? Chapter 810 Build the farm on the sea. How long have you been away? Lying on Jiang Chen's chest, Sun Jiao sighed softly, exhaling warm breath gently, drawing circles on his chest with her fingers, and whispered with resentment. Sorry. I don't want to hear you say sorry. Sun Jiao bit Jiang Chen's shoulder hard, and seeing his grimace of pain, she couldn't help but burst out laughing. Sometimes I think, actually 3 years ago, when we only had one villa, that kind of life was pretty good. Sun Jiao sighed, turned over and lay on the bed, supporting her chin with her arms, staring at Jiang Chen's profile infatuatedly, her lips opening and closing like a dream. Besides, I always feel that you were more lovely at that time. But, lovely or something. Jiang Chen's forehead was black. For a man, this is not a compliment. I know. Sun Jiao stuck out her tongue, and a smile bloomed at the corner of her lips. I just feel that you are more manly than then. Looking at Sun Jiao's little action, Jiang Chen smiled mischievously. But speaking of it, you are more feminine now than before. What? Are you saying that I didn't have a girlish charm before? Sun Jiao raised her eyebrows and punched Jiang Chen in the chest in dissatisfaction. Not only was she not, she was like a bandit, even more sturdy than a man. Okay. Of course, Jiang Chen only said this in his heart, but did not speak it out loud. But to be honest, at the beginning, it might be the wild charm of Sun Jiao that attracted him. What about now? Do you like me in the past or me now? Sun Jiao asked with a smile, rubbing her arm and lying beside Jiang Chen. I like both. Jiang Chen smiled without hesitation. What a greedy guy. Haha, isn't it good? The light outside the window is still unhealthy and dim, but the decadent gloom can no longer be seen on people's faces. In the streets and alleys, the figures of scavengers are still in a hurry, but no one will worry about dying tragically in the mouth of aliens one day. Wanghei City has gone through the most difficult 20 years, and now it has ushered in the first year of order. Nak will rule here, and bring permanent peace and prosperity to this place. There are a variety of dishes on the table. Yao, wearing an apron, served a pot of delicious vegetable stew in front of a pair of greedy cats. All these vegetables and pork are produced from the farm of the Garden of Eden. Although the fruits and vegetables picked from the CNC planting tower and the meat cut from the cloned pigs cannot be called delicious, eating them can make people feel sincere happiness. On the whole table, perhaps only the rice, salt, and cooking oil were imported by Jiang Chen from the real world. At the dinner table, Jiang Chen asked Lin Ling about building a farm on the sea. Build a farm on the sea? Oh. Are you talking about an underwater farm? Although there is such a thing, it is not very meaningful. After all, the arable land resources of Pan-Asia Cooperation are rich, and only some underwater facilities that are inconvenient to obtain supplies will be equipped with a small underwater farm. While chewing the delicious food, Lin Ling said in a vague voice, "Don't you have a lot of food over there, brother Jiang Chen?" Yao asked with her head tilted. Because there are many people who need to eat, there is not enough food. Jiang Chen rubbed Yao's hair lovingly and said with a smile. Although she didn't quite understand the reason, it was really comfortable to be touched on the head. Yao couldn't help but narrow her eyes happily and put the previous question behind her. Xiao Rao put her index finger on her lower lip and seriously gave Jiang Chen a bad idea. There are still a lot of tanks in stock. Can't we move some of them over? Tanks can't be eaten as food. Jiang Chen said sweetly. You can rob them. Sun Jiao interrupted nonchalantly while chewing on the delicious ribs. Sweat. Why are these two sisters so violent in their ideas? Come on, I don't want to pick up rags in two worlds. Jiang Chen complained fiercely. At this moment, Linling, who had been concentrating on eating, suddenly interrupted. Undersea farm. After all, this is not my strong point, and I can't do anything about it. But why don't you ask the people at the White Whale Research Station? They should be experts in this area, right? When Linling said this, Jiang Chen immediately said in his heart, yes, aren't the people at the White Whale Undersea Research Station planting vegetables on the seabed? Why did you forget about those people? Since signing a trade agreement with the 6th block, the White Whale Research Station has begun to provide paid escort agreements to merchants in the 6th block, maintaining the trade route from Wanhei City to Kyushu Island in Japan, and bypassing Aishu Island to Beiyu. In order to facilitate contact with merchants who need escort services, the White Whale Research Station set up an office on the street in front of the 6th block market. While handling business, it also performs the functions of an embassy part-time. After lunch, the family cleaned up the dishes together. At Yao's request, Jiang Chen took a nap with the little Lali. At about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Jiang Chen went to the 6th block and found Wu Yu, who was resident there, near the outer circle market. He mentioned the underwater farm to him. Undersea farm? What do you need that technology for? After listening to Jiang Chen's words, Wu Yu looked at him inexplicably and asked, the White Whale Research Station does have an underwater farm on the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, but due to energy shortages, the farm's output efficiency is very low. Otherwise the White Whale Research Station would not import so many canned goods from the 6th block every month. However, this is where Wu Yu's curiosity lies. Why would NAC, which clearly has something as awesome as the Garden of Eden, still want to build an underwater farm? For research purposes, the price is negotiable. But the technical information of this underwater farm should not be a difficult task for you, right? Jiang Chen asked. Seeing that Jiang Chen was not going to explain, Wu Yu shrugged and did not ask any more questions. It is indeed not a difficult task. As for the price, how about a ton of canned beef? After all, these materials are of certain value. Apart from the underwater research station, few units will store them. Deal. Jiang Chen waved his hand and said. Seeing that Jiang Chen agreed so quickly, Wu Yu was happy, but also a little regretful. He would have quoted a higher price earlier. However, since the deal had been reached, he did not say anything more, and sent the message back to the research station through the transmitter. Jiang Chen didn't wait long before the people at the research station sent him the relevant data of the underwater farm. After downloading the data to his watch, Jiang Chen quickly took out a check and signed a line of words on it. After telling Wu Yu that he could take the check to the NAC's granary to withdraw a ton of canned beef, he turned around and left the office of the White Whale Research Station. Chapter 811 New Hainang is established. The design of the underwater farm is not particularly complicated. With the industrial level of the new country and the 2 industrial grade 3D printers that have been moved to the present world, it can be completely completed in the industrial park of Anger Island. Although the design provided by the White Whale Research Station is a small underwater farm, the design principle is actually the same. Through the deduction of quantum computers, it is not difficult to change it into a large underwater farm. After Jiang Chen sent the data to the researchers in shelter number 27, within 2 days, the design of the large underwater farm was sent back. The whole design is divided into 2 parts, above water and underwater. The above water part is the offshore platform for divers to live, submersibles to dock, and transport ships to unload. This does not have any special technical content. The core of the whole design is the underwater part. The external structure is completely built with graphene materials, surrounded by a circular wall made of hardened graphene partitions, and the top is a graphene material airbag, filled with gas in the middle. From a distance, it looks like a flat and wide yurt. This yurt-like building is the planting unit of the submarine farm, with a radius of about 45 meters and an area of about 10 acres. There are connecting pipes on the wall to connect the various planting units. In addition to the connecting pipes, there are also molecular exchange membranes on the wall to separate dissolved carbon dioxide from seawater and discharge oxygen generated by plant metabolism. All plants are planted in this yurt. These planting units are like biospheres. Sensors are also installed inside to provide real-time data such as temperature, pH value, air temperature, and carbon dioxide concentration to the monitoring terminal on the offshore platform. As for the light required for plant growth, it is provided by LED light sources. Since the wavelength of LED light sources can be effectively controlled, the lettuce produced by the submarine farm can become crisper and softer as needed, and it can even taste better than crops grown on land. With the information sorted out in shelter number 27, Jiang Chen returned to the present world without stopping, and immediately transmitted the information to the database of Future Group, then found Jiao and told her about his plan to build a submarine farm. After listening to Jiang Chen's plan with a confused face, Jiao repeated the sentence dumbfoundedly. Undersea farm. It was like a few days ago, the two of them were still discussing the acquisition of an Australian farm. After only 2 days of not seeing each other, the chairman opened the door and told her that we would not acquire the Australian farm, but we would open up wasteland and grow crops ourselves. Where to grow crops? Under the sea. What the hell is going on? Wait, let me sort it out first. Jiao rubbed her eyebrows, sorted out what Jiang Chen had just said in her mind, and then asked, has the Future Group's laboratory developed something new? Undersea farms? How to grow crops under the sea? Plant kelp. Hearing Jiao's question, Jiang Chen couldn't help but hold his forehead. This time he slowed down his speech and called out the holographic concept map in the database and told Jiao again. Listening to Jiang Chen's explanation, Jiao, who finally understood, gradually brightened her eyes. Although she didn't know much about agriculture, as the CEO of a multinational group, she had a very keen sense of the market. At the first moment, she figured out the market value of this submarine farm. In this way, the plan of Future Group to enter the food market was finalized. The registered subsidiary is called New Country Ocean Agriculture Co Limited, referred to as New Sea Farm, which is wholly owned by Future Group. After the establishment of New Sea Farm, the Presidential Palace of New Country immediately approved the document, designated 400,000 acres of sea area north of Anger Island as a submarine planting area, and contracted New Sea Farm at a price of $100 per acre. Due to New Country's tax-free policy on agriculture, Future Group does not need to pay land tax for this 400,000 acres of sea area, and only needs to pay $40 million in one lump sum to use it permanently. The water depth of this contracted sea area is between 100 meters and 120 meters. The seabed terrain is relatively flat. The submarine volcanic activity and ocean current movement are relatively stable, and there are no large fish activities. It is simply a treasure land tailor-made for Jiang Chen. Moreover, according to the conclusions of the seabed geological survey conducted by Future Mining, the bottom mud of this sea area contains a high abundance of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, which belongs to eutrophic sediment. After simple treatment, it can be used as fertilizer for farm crops. After the establishment of the New Country Ocean Agriculture Company, it immediately attracted countless attention from home and abroad. Some people were surprised, some doubted, and some were unbelievable, but more were curious. Especially those marine countries with small territories and extremely dependent on imported food are full of interest in the concept of seabed planting proposed by the new sea farmer. After all, these countries often have territorial waters. If this vast territorial waters can be turned into arable land, then these island people who eat expensive imported food will have to wake up with laughter in their dreams. Of course, given that the new sea farmer has no plans to build farms abroad for the time being, even if they wake up with laughter in their dreams, this seabed farm has nothing to do with them. In fact, seabed planting is not a flashy gimmick. As early as 2015, the Italian Ocean Coral Reef Group had proposed the concept of seabed planting and named the project Nemo Garden, using balloons to carry out planting operations on the seabed. The constant temperature maintained by the water body underwater is very conducive to plant growth, which is a huge advantage that most land farms do not have. Although crops will be impacted by huge water flow underwater, it is better than being bitten by insects on the ground, and there are many bad weather on land. Another thing is carbon dioxide. Someone once confirmed through the simulation of the ocean cycle and the system of carbon dioxide dissolved in seawater that about 40% of the carbon dioxide produced by fossil fuels will be absorbed by the ocean, so the ocean can be regarded as the largest carbon dioxide pool on the earth. Therefore, the high concentration of carbon dioxide under the sea is like steroids for plants, making them grow rapidly. It is no exaggeration to say that the maturity cycle of crops in this submarine farm can be shortened by up to 50% compared with traditional methods. However, until now, the Nemo Garden project has been in the experimental stage. The new sea farmer suddenly jumped out at this time and said that he had mastered the technology of large-scale planting of land crops on the seabed, which was undoubtedly incredible to others. Even many media hesitated after learning the news and actually put the report on the entertainment panel. But this is not surprising. After all, the concept proposed by Xinheinang is too advanced, and the public's attention to agriculture is not as much as other fields. Although these newspapers and media also believe in the technological strength of Future Group, they still can't help but make fun of it. After all, you haven't produced the finished product yet. As for these reports, Jiang Chen didn't care at all. Anyway, I will slap you in the face when the time comes, so why bother about what you media are talking about now? Chapter 812 Greenpeace. Graphene partitions and films are all produced in factories in the new Malaysia Special Zone. Those with higher technological content are directly printed by industrial 3D printers. In this way, we have been busy until the beginning of July. The development of the 400,000 mu of submarine planting area has been completed by half, and tens of thousands of submarine planting units are laid flat on the seabed at a depth of about 100 meters. Through the delicate but strong graphene film, you can see the rows of emerald green plants in the culture tanks, which are thriving under the weak LED light source. There are a total of 10 offshore platforms distributed in the sea area, each of which has 12 staff members and 2 Xinghuan trade bodyguards responsible for safety work. Each offshore platform has to manage thousands of planting units, which seems a bit reluctant, but it is not. A series of tasks such as watering, fertilizing, sowing, and changing the soil in the culture tank can all be completed automatically by the planting unit. Only when encountering a small number of emergencies, the staff will need to drive the submersible into the water. The surrounding waters have become an oxygen-rich environment suitable for the growth of fish because of the oxygen emitted by these planting units. In order not to waste such an excellent fishing ground, Jiang Chen planned the area above the planting area into an offshore fishing ground, built a floating breeding base, raised sardines, salmon, cod, lobsters and other common species in the seafood market, and produced byproducts such as fish oil. Because of the oxygen-rich environment, the growth rate of these fry is much faster than that of wild ones. The meat will be more delicious, and it is easier to accumulate fat. In addition, the feces of these fish can be collected by special equipment as natural organic fertilizer. Farms and fisheries complement each other, which is the so-called circular agriculture. As early as mid-August this year, vegetables produced in Singapore can be seen in the farmers' market in Singapore. And by the end of this year at the latest, Singapore's food market will reverse the situation of zero exports, and in one fell swoop turn from a major food importing country into a granary in the Pacific. Cargill of the United States does not sell farms? Smile, I don't care. However, Australia's Sunrise company is not so happy to see such a situation. Sunrise, which has monopolized the rice market in Australia and most of the agricultural product market, has only 2 competitors in Asia, Thailand, and Vietnam. However, now a new company, Xinheinang, has emerged to grow vegetables on the seabed. This is obviously not a good start. Originally, they were quite optimistic about the agricultural product market in Singapore. After all, the cultivated land area and population of Singapore are not proportional at all, and the ability to resist the shock of global food market price fluctuations is almost zero. However, now Singapore has gotten rid of its dependence on Australian agricultural products in such a surprising way, which is really unacceptable to the senior management of Sunrise. At the same time that Xinheinang announced that it would build a fishery above the seabed farm and promote 3-dimensional agriculture, Cargill of the United States held a board meeting to discuss countermeasures to the changes in the Asian agricultural market. From the beginning of the meeting, there was endless debate on the meeting table. Cargill of the United States has a large number of shareholders. Although there are only one or two real decision makers, this kind of meeting cannot exclude those qualified shareholders. Not only underwater farms, I heard they are planning to build underwater ranches. These monkeys on the islands that break coconuts, are they planning to turn the entire shallow sea of the Western Pacific into farmland? We must find a way to stop them. But new country is a country, we can't convince Congress to interfere with them, right? What resources can we mobilize? The US Department of Agriculture? It's not at the right level. Use dumping. We can use low-priced food to squeeze out their underwater farms. A shareholder knocked on the table with his knuckles and said loudly, "It's difficult. If the future group is determined to enter the agricultural market, they won't care about losing this little money. With their financial resources and influence, they are at least at the same level as the Boston Consortium." The meeting was unexpectedly quiet at this point. Yes, no matter what, the future group is at the same level as the Boston Consortium. Although the four major companies ABCD have the shadow of the consortium's investment behind them, Cargill is a privatized company with its main assets in Asia. The interest relationship between it and the major consortiums is not that close, and its market value is only between 40 billion and 50 billion US dollars. Isn't it asking for trouble to fight a price war with future group, whose market value is more than hundreds of billions? Even if they are high-tech and their market value is somewhat inflated, no bank would be willing to refuse such a big customer if they just take out some assets as collateral. Unless the US government thinks it is necessary to take action, they can't go to future group by themselves, which is simply asking for trouble. The CEO of Cargill propped his arms on the table, rubbing his sore forehead with his fingers repeatedly. If he had known the result, he would have sold the 400,000 acres of farms. Anyway, there is no fertile land in northern Australia. The fertile land is concentrated in the east and south. Now, if Singapore enters the food market, their market share in Asia will be cut off again. Undersea farms? The area of Singapore's territorial waters is really scary. The area of arable land on the seabed leaves people with too much room for imagination. Yesterday morning, we received a notice from the United Nations Ocean Conservancy. Greenpeace sued us, claiming that our submarine projects have seriously damaged the ecological environment of the Pacific Ocean. A professor at the School of Biological Research at Columbia University in the United States supported this view, claiming that according to the mathematical model he established, these 400,000 acres of submarine farmland may completely change the living habits of local fish, thereby triggering a large-scale marine ecological disaster. In addition, Greenpeace held a parade in front of the New Zealand Embassy in California, USA, holding iPads to play marine protection documentaries, to protest the New Zealand government's disregard for nature. In the presidential palace, Zhang Yaping faced the secretary's report with a headache. Greenpeace. How come there is another Greenpeace? Greenpeace was originally a civil rights organization that opposed nuclear testing during the Cold War, but now it has evolved from non-violence to a model of anti-civilization organization. As for why they say that, in their eyes, from chemicals to genetically modified organisms, all industries are element of the devil and must be eliminated, from Apple computers to Cantona and mineral water bottles, all are toxic, harmful, and useless things that will cause harm for thousands of years. Any country or organization will feel a headache if they are entangled by these people. Compared with the unknown Blue Dolphin International organization that once entangled the future group, this Greenpeace is undoubtedly more organized and more difficult to deal with. Now Greenpeace has learned the lessons of its predecessors, bypassing the future group, a hard bone, and directly putting pressure on the New Zealand government. Although it doesn't hurt, it's still a lot of trouble. These saints who have nothing to do, don't they know that there are still people starving in this world? Zhang Yaping angrily cursed, throwing the document on the table. In fact, the one he really wanted to scold was Jiang Chen, who had to clean up the mess every time. After calming down, Zhang Yaping said to the secretary, "Call my chief of staff, we need to hold a meeting within the party on this matter." Yes. Chapter 813 The Philippine Army's Ambition. Jiang Chen did hear about the troubles of Greenpeace from Zhang Yaping, but he didn't take it seriously. The other party obviously knew that the bodyguards of starring trade were not easy to mess with. They didn't do stupid things like driving ships to hit offshore platforms. They just held a parade in front of the embassy and stirred up trouble in international public opinion. In fact, not many people took them seriously. Since it didn't interfere with the normal work of Future Group, Jiang Chen didn't pay attention to these trivial little things. In comparison, there are more important things waiting for him to deal with, such as the increasingly tense situation in Mindanao. The KS-32 vehicle-mounted anti-UAV system, led by the US Department of Defense and developed in cooperation with Lockheed Martin, has left the laboratory and officially entered production. As the main equipment of the fly-catching plan, this KS-32 anti-UAV system can suppress information on drones with a radius of 500 meters and force the landing of single-soldier drones, including the beta series of Future Group. The Philippine Army became Lockheed Martin's first customer for the Flycatcher program, spending $11 million to purchase 1,000 KS-32 anti-drone systems for frontline troops. There are 8,000 more units in the follow-up purchase plan. The Philippines has made great efforts to equip every Hummer, armored vehicle, and tank with this anti-drone equipment to invalidate the drone tactics of starring trade. At the same time, the Philippines also purchased 5 Patriot 3 surface-to-air missile systems, including 357 PAC-3 missiles and 5 test missiles, as well as corresponding radar equipment and upgrade kit racks to cope with the air superiority established by Aurora 20. Although China protested against the deployment of the Patriot 3 missile system in the Philippines, it did not affect the implementation of this arms sale. In addition, it is said that the Philippines also analyzed the case of the last EMP rocket attack in Mindanao, which caused the command center to completely lose contact with the lower division headquarters and introduced the world's most advanced EMP area protection device from the European laboratory. Obviously, the newly appointed Aquino IV is determined to recover Mindanao. General Santos, the president of Morocco, is obviously more anxious than Jiang Chen. Since the Philippines increased its border reconnaissance in July, he has been constantly calling Jiang Chen and asking for help from starring trade. We should take the initiative. If we wait for them to reorganize the army, we will make greater sacrifices. It's right to take the initiative tactically, but we can't do it strategically. Sitting in the study, Jiang Chen crossed his legs and shook his head to deny Santos' proposal. According to the US-Philippines Mutual Defense Treaty, if Morocco takes the lead in provoking a war, it will undoubtedly pull the United States from the other side of the Pacific Ocean onto the Philippines' chariot, which is exactly what the Philippines wants. This Aquino IV is obviously smarter than his predecessor. In terms of strategic deployment, he did not hide his intention to use force at all, and his purpose was to provoke Morocco to take the lead in launching an attack. Only when this war is an aggressive war will the Mutual Defense Treaty not take effect. In other words, Morocco must wait patiently for the Philippines to fire the first shot to avoid the worst. But, I need you to stay calm, Mr. Santos. Do you understand what I mean? Jiang Chen interrupted him and said slowly. After hearing Jiang Chen's words, Santos forced back all the questions in his heart and said unwillingly, yes. Not bad. Jiang Chen nodded and sat up straight in his chair. What is the current size of Morocco's army? A total of 50,000. Santos replied. Mindanao has a total population of 18 million. With its backward industrial and economic levels, it is already quite difficult to support an army of 50,000 people and 2 mechanized brigades. It seems that Santos is not corrupt and spends all day drinking and eating meat. He still has some achievements in the army. Recruit the reserve forces and expand the army by 20,000. I will solve the equipment problem for you. Don't worry about it. Starring trade takes the route of elite troops, and the weapons produced by future people's military industry cannot meet the needs of Morocco. Fortunately, Jiang Chen had a good relationship with Russia, so it was not difficult to get cheap arms from Russia through Natasha. After hanging up Santos' phone call, Jiang Chen phoned Natasha and ordered 40,000 AK-12 assault rifles, 10,000 boxes of ammunition, and infantry support equipment such as mortars and RPG-7 rocket launchers from Russia to support the newly formed infantry division of Morocco. The total arms sales of $150 million were a fair price. The contract was signed on the spot. It seemed that Russia had expected that Jiang Chen would buy these equipment from them. After putting away the contract, Natasha asked Jiang Chen about the drone. The Beta series drones seemed to be affected by the KS-32 anti-drone system. Jiang Chen knew what Natasha was concerned about and waved his hand indifferently. It's just a civilian drone. The one sold to you is the Beta 3B, which is a paramilitary drone with built-in anti-interference equipment. Unless you are within 100 meters of the KS-32, you will not be affected by this vehicle-mounted anti-drone system. Then I'm relieved, Natasha said with a smile. Russia's imaginary enemy is NATO. If the US fly-catching plan is proven to be effective, it will undoubtedly weaken the Kremlin's interest in the Beta series of drones. As the leader of the Russian side's introduction of Beta drones, Natasha naturally did not want to see her contribution being regarded as a joke in China. After signing the contract, Natasha said she wanted to go to the embassy, so she left. Seeing that it was still early, Jiang Chen, who was a little bored, took a bottle of champagne from the refrigerator, leaned on the sofa, opened his watch, called up the holographic panel, opened the browser, and started browsing Weibo. Speaking of which, since Liu Yao helped him register a Weibo account, he has hardly used it. For a while, he handed the account to the company's operation team to manage, but later Future Technology became Future Group, and he no longer let the operation team manage the account. Thinking about it carefully, it seems that the last time he posted on Weibo was a year ago. Opening the Weibo account, Jiang Chen noticed that his fans had exceeded 90 million, and the long list of private messages was even more astonishing. Damn, am I so popular in China? Jiang Chen touched his chin and thought about this question seriously. In his impression, the only time he went to Hong Kong, because his itinerary was leaked, a large group of reporters surrounded him, and the 2 times he went to Wanghai City to meet Liu Yao millimeters privately, basically did not attract the attention of the outside world. Shaking his head and putting the question aside, Jiang Chen looked down the trending search list and unexpectedly found that the words undersea farm were on the list. It seems that Greenpeace is stirring up trouble. There is still some benefit. The underwater farm, which no one paid attention to originally and the Future Group did not deliberately promote, has become a hot topic on the internet, which also surprised Jiang Chen. The New Wolf official also invited a professor from a domestic university to give a serious explanation of this undersea farm. However, just when Jiang Chen was about to click to see what the expert had to say, a phone call came in. Continue the outbreak tomorrow. Chapter 814 Pirate Hijacking. The call was from Sun Jiao, and from her tone, she seemed very anxious. Although she hadn't spoken yet, Jiang Chen had already sensed the seriousness of the matter from the other end of the phone. The ship responsible for shipping the desalination platform was intercepted by pirates when it entered the Arabian Sea. The 15 employees of Gaoxin Danshu and 35 crew members on board were taken hostage. We have contacted the Saudi side, but the hijacked ship has left the Arabian Sea and lost its signal in the waters west of Somalia. When Jiang Chen heard the news that the Gaoxin Danshu freighter was hijacked, he sat up straight from the sofa. Send me the coordinates of the missing ship. Wait a minute. The phone was hung up, and within half a minute, Sun Jiao had sent the signal of the missing ship to Jiang Chen. After confirming the coordinates of the missing ship, Jiang Chen immediately contacted Ivan. The Gaoxin freshwater carrier and the desalination platform were hijacked by armed men. I have uploaded the coordinates of the last place the ship disappeared to the headquarters server. I order you to immediately send a search and rescue ship to the target sea area and rescue the people for me. Yes, sir. Ivan replied immediately. After giving the order, Jiang Chen immediately got up from the sofa. Seeing Jiang Chen changing clothes, Aisha, who was walking down the stairs, walked towards him. Are you going out? Yes. Jiang Chen threw his pajamas aside and changed into a shirt. Our ship was hijacked in the Arabian Sea. I have to go to Crescent Island immediately. Aisha, please drive. I'll go change my clothes. After saying that, Aisha turned around and disappeared up the stairs. Pushing open the door of the villa, Jiang Chen went straight to the garage. When he arrived at the garage, Aisha, who had changed her clothes, had already sat in the Lamborghini before him and started the car skillfully. After Jiang Chen opened the car door and sat in, the car immediately went out and set off. On the way, he called Natasha and asked her to come back later in the evening. After hanging up the phone, Jiang Chen looked at the passing scenery outside the window, and his brows gradually furrowed. The Gyeoksan Danshu shipping ship was hijacked by pirates, which was definitely a serious problem. Whether it was the seawater desalination platform shipped by the ship or the more than 50 hostages on the ship, it was hard for him not to worry about it. But to be honest, there was one thing that Jiang Chen did not expect. Usually, there would be 4 bodyguards from the starring trade stationed on the ship sent overseas by Gyeoksan Danshu. Although they were not equipped with drones and heavy weapons, they should have no problem fighting against ordinary pirates. However, it was not until the ship disappeared from the map that the future group realized that something was wrong. There must be something fishy about it. At this moment, Jiang Chen suddenly thought of something. Turn around. Aisha did not hesitate and immediately turned the steering wheel to turn around. Where are we going? The southern pier of Koro Island. We are not going to Crescent Island, but to Coconut Island. In the Indian Ocean, the hijacked ship was sailing towards Madagascar. Several pirates dressed in black and holding axes stood at the bow, watching the employee of Gyeoksan Danshu board the ship from the offshore platform along the connecting arm under the escort of a pirate holding a rifle. The employee with the muzzle against his back was pale and was pushed and shoved into the cabin. These pirates are quite familiar with Gyeoksan Danshu shipping ship. Not only can they drive the ship, but they also know that there is a locator installed in the desalination platform. The pirate who pointed a gun at him from behind just forced him to turn off the locator. After controlling the captain's room of the shipping ship and turning off the locator of the offshore platform, the entire ship disappeared from the map of future group. Even if the Saudi Navy came to rescue, no one could find them. In the corridor he passed by, he could see the bloodstains left after a simple scrubbing. Those bloodstains belonged to the soldiers who resisted the pirates, but now they had their throats cut and thrown into the sea. They did not die at the hands of the enemy, but from the mutiny of their own people. There were pirate informants hiding among the sailors on the ship. When the 4 starring trade soldiers were exchanging fire with the approaching pirate ship, more than a dozen pirate informants hijacked ordinary people hiding in the cabin and attacked the 4 soldiers from behind with knives in the kitchen. Standing in the cabin, the bearded pirate leader Zaid glanced disdainfully at the people huddled in the corner, watching them trembling under the threat of their accomplices' guns, and a smile appeared on his lips. Badgery, don't scare them. We can earn another ransom by keeping these kids. Haha. Compared with the big business behind our ship, how much money can these wimps get? Why not get 2 of them to bleed for fun? I haven't seen sharks eat people for a long time. Baggery laughed wildly. He deliberately used English when he spoke, which frightened the hostages even more. No matter how small a mosquito is, it's still meat. They'd grinned. The mysterious buyer on Madagascar Island placed an order for the desalination platform of Gyeoksan Danshu at a sky-high price of $500 million. Since the beginning of the year, they have stopped all plans to rob merchant ships and concentrate on planning and implementing this robbery against the future group. One hostage can only extort $1 million at most, and more than 30 hostages can only extort $30 million. Compared with the income of $500 million, it is just a fraction. What's more, exchanging hostages also has the risk of running into gun muzzles. To be honest, if it weren't for the fear of angering the future group, Zed would have ordered the execution of these hostages to feed the fish. Being overly frightened. Why are you crying? Haha. Come on, lift your face up for me to see. Baggery smiled cruelly, walked forward, and used the muzzle of the gun to lift the bangs of the blonde beauty. When he saw the pretty face of the crying girl, he whistled immediately. TSK. Boss, this girl is pretty. Look, our brothers have been holding back for so long. Hurry up and get back. Zed waved his hand impatiently. Baggery was his best shooter, the most loyal and the most capable fighter. His only shortcoming was that he was too lustful. But now the ship has sailed out of the Arabian Sea. Even if the Saudi Navy knew their location, they probably couldn't catch up, not to mention that they were still running around blindly on the high seas. Anyway, the matter was half done, and he was too lazy to blame his men. After all, as Baggery said, the brothers had been holding back for too long. Cheerful whistles rang out in the cabin, and several black men shouted that their leader was wise, and then approached the hostages with a lewd smile on their faces, without coloring the female creatures that he liked. Badgery goes first, the others wait. This is a $500 million deal. We can all live a carefree life after we do this. Whoever wants to delay the important work, I will smash his head myself. Although these pirates were eager to vent their desires, but the leader had said it, they had to suppress their impatience, and cheered in response. Please, let me go, woo. The blonde beauty begged and resisted desperately, which annoyed Badgery. The black man swung the butt of his gun directly, hitting the blonde beauty on the forehead, and knocking her unconscious. The greedy green eyes swept over the beautiful figure, and Badgery smiled and rubbed her body, and then he didn't care whether she was dead or alive, and walked out of the door by her collar. There was no need to say what kind of cruel treatment she would face next. The hostages squatting in the corner watched their colleagues being taken out of the door, but they could only squat there helplessly, holding their heads in their hands, enduring the self-blame and humiliation in their hearts. Several female compatriots' calves kept trembling, and they kept shrinking their bodies behind their male colleagues and husbands, because they had noticed the malicious gazes of the other pirates in the room. Even though they knew that this pitiful sense of security could not bring them any safety at all. Chapter 815 Rescue Operation. Hey, little bitch, stick your ass up for me. Right, that's it, little slut. Badgery hummed the tune of his hometown while talking to himself. He threw the knocked out blonde beauty onto the railing of the boat, leaned his rifle against the side, took off his belt, and tied her hands to the outside of the boat. The butt of the rifle hit her hard, and even though the black man made a lot of noise, the blonde beauty in work clothes still didn't wake up. Her jeans were torn, and the rips on the fur edge revealed her snow white skin. Her breasts, at least 36D, were wrapped in a shirt and distorted by the pressure on the railing. Her golden hair was stuck to her forehead by the blood, and her pretty face was twisted in pain. Ulrika was from Ukraine and had a beautiful name. She thought she could finally get rid of those cruel things after escaping from her hometown, but she didn't expect to encounter such a horrible hell during this risk-free trip to the sea. In a daze, she felt the restraint on her wrists and slowly opened her beautiful eyelashes. At this moment, Ulrika was suddenly horrified to find that the black man behind her had taken off his and her pants and was spreading her legs. No! She screamed hoarsely and tried to get rid of his restraints, but the strength of the two was not at the same level. Her resistance not only did not work, but also aroused the black man behind her. Be obedient. If you don't want to be beaten, be honest. Relax. Don't move. I will make you comfortable soon. I beg you, don't do this. I will pay the ransom. Her plea was only met with a laugh from Badgery. Ransom? Ha. Wait until I make you suffer the most. The broken English stopped abruptly, and Ulrika suddenly felt that the force restraining her from behind suddenly loosened. In an instant, a sticky and hot liquid sprayed on her neck. She froze there, her stiff eyes slowly moved downwards, and in an instant, Ulrika's pupils suddenly shrank. It's blood. The blood soaked her collar. Just as she was about to scream, someone covered her mouth from behind. Just as she was struggling desperately and losing her mind, the person behind her leaned close to her ear and warned in a low voice. Okay girl, I know you're going to scream, but if you don't want to kill everyone on the ship, I advise you not to do it. The voice was very magnetic, and it felt a little itchy when it blew against her ears. Knowing that the person behind her was here to save her, Ulrika gradually calmed down from the shock, leaned in the man's arms and nodded slowly. Very good, it seems you've calmed down. Jiang Chen slowly released the hand that was covering her mouth, and then slowly released the hand that was holding her. Skillfully pulling out the dagger, Jiang Chen slashed the belt tied around the wrist of the white beauty, and then reached out and pressed it on her ear. Aisha, how is your side? Clear. Aisha's answer was very straightforward, and also with a very indifferent smell of blood. Very good, you move to the top of the hostage room first. I'll be ready here soon. After saying that, Jiang Chen ended the call. Okay. A handsome gun bolt sound came from the headset. Aisha ended the call and began to move downstairs. Next to the lifebuoy at the stern, The black man fell to the ground with a deep blood mark on his neck, and his wide eyes were full of incredible fear. Moving her eyes away from the dead man, Ulrika looked at Jiang Chen, who was covered in a pitch black combat uniform, and asked in a low voice with a nervous mood, who are you? If I were you, I would put on my pants before talking. Jiang Chen raised the rifle in his hand and said teasingly. Ulrika blushed and hurriedly pulled the hem of her t-shirt to cover her indecent parts and moved to the side of her jeans, then slowly squatted down and carefully picked up her pants. While she was putting on her pants, Jiang Chen had released the hummingbird drone from the drone backpack on his back and threw it out of the ship. Then he pressed his body against the wall at the corner and gently opened the safety next to the trigger of the rifle with his finger. The drone thrown out of the ship staggered and adjusted its direction. The moment it touched the sea surface, it rushed towards the center deck of the ship along the sea level. Stay here and don't move, Jiang Chen warned lightly, then raised his rifle and began to move along the wall. What are you going to do? Ulrika asked worriedly. Nonsense, of course I'm going to save others. Wait, there are more than 30 of them, and you are alone. Jiang Chen ignored her, lowered his body, bypassed the iron stairs, and moved behind a small container. Jiang Chen's water drop number 1 was the only one in the world that could catch up with the hijacked ship in such a short time. In order to save both the people and the equipment, he had to go there in person. With the terrifying cruising speed and the radio life signal detection device, after arriving at the coordinates of the loss of contact, Jiang Chen easily locked the location of the shipping ship and drove at full speed to catch up. It was not dark yet, and it was only a few hours since the shipping ship lost contact. After approaching the shipping ship, the two acted separately. Aisha went to the captain's room, and Jiang Chen went directly to the deck. The new K2 mechanical exoskeleton can be mounted with an optical stealth module. The two were like invisible ghosts on the ship, approaching these bloodthirsty pirates. Speaking of which, the last time they rescued hostages was 3 years ago. Through the screen on his arm, Jiang Chen controlled the hummingbird drone to go around behind the pirates on the deck, and then circled the hummingbird drone to attack the target. He rubbed his finger on the trigger, took a deep breath, prepared himself mentally, and suddenly pressed the button to confirm the attack. At the same time, he flashed out of the bunker with his rifle and pulled the trigger at the red dot in his sight. Bang, bang, bang. The gunshots suppressed by the silencer rang out, and the accumulated firepower net instantly lit up blood on several pirates. Except for the sound of the waves, only a series of short and weak metal collisions came from the entire deck. No one noticed. Jiang Chen glanced at the map on the screen on his right arm, and 6 of the marked red dots went out instantly. There were still 4 people left on the deck, mainly distributed at the bow. In addition to the place where the hostages were held, the 15 pirates in the cabin had died at the hands of Aisha. Is the hostage room next? Jiang Chen muttered to himself while replacing the magazine for his Ripper rifle. Aisha, how are you doing? The silencer has been placed, and there is also a C4 for blasting. Very good, I'll be there right away. Glancing at the remaining 4 targets on the deck, Jiang Chen raised a grim smile, marked these scattered targets one by one to the drone, and then walked towards the cabin where the hostages were held. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 816, Rescue Operation. Where are you? Still on the high seas, about 100 nautical miles from Madagascar. We will be there in 6 hours at the latest. Don't worry, we have shaken off the sordine AV, and the locators on the desalination platform have been turned off. No one can find us now. Zaid laughed and said flatteringly. That may not be the case. The person on the other end of the phone laughed and continued in a hoarse voice. You'd better be careful. You know, if this deal fails, it won't be over with just a contract. Zaid held his breath, swallowed quietly, and said softly, I understand. That's good. The other party hung up the phone. Putting the phone back in his pocket, Zaid spitted at the person next to him and pulled the bolt hard, scaring the hostages in the cabin back. Damn it, cheer up, why hasn't that bastard Baggery come back yet? Seeing the leader's irritable look, the 4 gunmen standing next to the hostages looked at each other and whispered in the local dialect of the African tribe. "What's wrong with the boss?" "I don't know. Maybe he's angry." "Shh, if the boss hears it, he will definitely twist your head off." "What are you whispering about over there?" Hearing something, Zaid raised his voice and shouted, staring fiercely at several of his men, frightening them so much that they immediately shut their mouths and shook their heads. "No, nothing." Cursing and retracting his gaze, Zaid glanced at the wall clock anxiously. For some reason, he felt very panicked at the moment, as if something bad was about to happen. He shook his head to get rid of this strange feeling, but at this moment, he heard a humming sound of electricity. The air in the cabin became strangely stable under the effect of the special force field, and all the sounds disappeared, as if they were wiped out. Silencing device, sold for only 10 credits in the weapon shop in the 6th block. What sound? However, before Zaid had time to think about this question carefully, the ceiling exploded, and smoke instantly covered the entire cabin. Before he could react to what was happening, the heavy blow to the back of his head cut off his 5 senses. Almost at the same time, the door of the cabin was kicked open, and a drone and a gun rushed in with orange-red gun flames. Tut tut tut. Jiang Chen held the trigger tightly, and the muzzle swept over the pirates standing. The bullet jumped in the cabin, but it was over soon. The whole set of actions happened in 1 second. With the speed of Jiang Chen and Aisha, these pirates whose physical fitness was only slightly higher than that of ordinary people had no chance to fight back. "Aisha, go open the window." "Okay." Aisha, who had ended her optical invisibility, put her rifle behind her back, walked to the side of the cabin, and opened the window. The sea breeze poured in from the door, and soon blew the smoke in the house out of the window. Looking at the dead bodies on the ground, several hostages with poor mental quality began to retch with their mouths covered. Fortunately, the pirates did not give them breakfast and lunch, so now even if they wanted to vomit, they couldn't vomit anything. Looking at the 2 people in the cabin, the captain squatting among the hostages plucked up his courage, swallowed his saliva and asked, Are you from Starring Trade?" Hearing this, Jiang Chen looked at him, grinned, and took off the mask on his face. "You can think so, but you should call me chairman." The cabin was silent, including the captain. Everyone opened their mouths wide, their eyes wide as ping pong balls. "Chairman? Jiang Chen? Wait. Why would Jiang Chen come to rescue people?" This feeling is like an American who was captured by the Taliban. He finally waited for the American soldiers to rescue him, but the captain of the Special Forces team who led the rescue team took off his mask and revealed his identity as Ao Guanhei. It was so weird. No, it was so incredible. Because the information they learned was too shocking, the hostages forgot the cheers of surviving the disaster. Ignoring the hostages who were in chaos, Jiang Chen just glanced at their wounds. After finding that there were no serious injuries, he gave instructions to the captain. "Can you still move?" "Yes." The bearded captain nodded quickly. "Take your first mate to the captain's room, maintain the current course, and continue to head towards Madagascar." What? The captain thought he had heard it wrong. "Continue to head towards Madagascar. Do I need to repeat it again?" Jiang Chen repeated patiently. But, okay. The captain nodded in compromise. Although he didn't know the reason why Jiang Chen did this, he chose to trust his chairman. Remember not to turn on the GPS, continue to lose contact, and the active high-tech freshwater employees, get up and turn on the locator of the offshore platform. Go now. Also, who knows where the 4 bodyguards of Xinghuan Trade are tied up? Jiang Chen looked around the hostages squatting in the corner, and did not find anyone who looked like a soldier. Hearing Jiang Chen's question, a crew member who had already stood up whispered, They have been executed." The temperature in the cabin dropped suddenly. Aisha, who was tying up Zaid, raised her head and looked at Jiang Chen's back. She could clearly feel that he was in a bad mood at the moment. Jiang Chen's face was terribly gloomy. He took a deep breath and turned to walk out the door. "Take Zaid with me to the warehouse under the deck." "Yes." Aisha nodded, carried Zaid, who was tied up like a dumpling, on her back, and chased out the door. The people who stayed in the cabin looked at each other, not knowing what to do at this time. The captain stood up and ordered the injured and women to go back to their rooms to rest first. Some of the others went to clean up the blood on the ship. The first mate, the second mate and others followed him to the captain's room. While going down the stairs, Jiang Chen pressed his ear and contacted the command center far away on Crescent Island. The coordinates have been sent. Ivan, how are your preparations going? The Sea Lion Special Forces have set off on the frigate. Boss, don't do this next time. It's too messy, Ivan said with a wry smile. To be honest, even if Ivan would rather the entire ship be slaughtered by pirates, he would not agree with Jiang Chen taking an agent to board the ship to rescue people. Not to mention one shipping ship. Even 10 ships are not as important as one of his fingers. If Jiang Chen had not already set out halfway, he would never agree to Jiang Chen's plan. Special circumstances. Jiang Chen replied simply. Also, tell the sea lions to hurry up. The battle is not over yet. Chapter 817. The battle is not over yet. Hijacking a Chinese transport ship carrying European industrial machine tools, attacking the Chinese embassy in Djibouti, launching terrorist attacks in Yemen. To put pressure on the local government, employers usually give us dirty jobs that are inconvenient to do personally. The rewards are high, the intelligence is guaranteed, and the risks of the missions are usually low. In a dark room with only a beam of light, Zaid's hands were tied behind his back on a chair, his head drooped, and his eyes stared blankly at the dark floor. There was drool on his lips, and it was obvious that he had been injected with truth serum. With the crimes he committed, it was really a bargain for him to be tortured with truth serum. However, Jiang Chen did not intend to waste time on these details, and he would need this guy later, so he directly used the truth serum. Who is your employer? Jiang Chen asked in a cold tone. The employer did not reveal his identity. This is customary. Who is the person who is responsible for contacting you? Arrow Military Company. Mayad Island in western Madagascar. Jiang Chen had already obtained all the necessary information. He turned off the recorder on the table beside him and gestured to Aisha. Aisha understood and grabbed the bucket and poured it on the face of the pirate leader. A bucket of cold water was poured on his face. Zaid choked on his saliva and woke up with a violent cough. The dim light made it difficult for him to see who was sitting opposite him. He could only see a black rifle leaning against the side. You don't need to know who I am. Let's make a deal. What deal? Take my people to deliver the goods. If the deal is successful, I can let you go. Jiang Chen said slowly. You're crazy. Do you know who they are? Arrowhead Military Company, although it's just a private military contractor, is powerful enough to even beat Madagascar's 22,000 regular troops. Zaid's eyes swayed uneasily, and the beard on his chin kept trembling. We will die. Before you refuse, you should first understand one thing. Jiang Chen raised a finger and said with a smile, if you don't cooperate, you will die now. Beads of sweat fell from Zaid's forehead. He looked around with a struggling expression and lowered his voice. Why should I believe that you will let me go? Because you are just an ant to me. Jiang Chen said lightly. Just an ant. Zaid's mouth twitched, but he couldn't refute it. Cooperate or die. Make your choice. No longer trying to persuade him, Jiang Chen slowly loaded the pistol and then pressed it against his forehead. The coldness of the metal made Zaid's heart rise to his throat. He didn't want to die yet. He still had more than $20 million in his Swiss savings. This money was enough for him to flee to any country and start a new life. Even if he would face the pursuit of Arrowhead Military Company and the forces behind it, it was better than dying in the sea without knowing why. Cooperation. Jiang Chen smiled and put away his gun. A wise choice. After the cooperation was reached, Zed was temporarily locked in a dark room and watched by a drone. Because he needed to confirm the contact with Arrowhead Company, Jiang Chen untied him and handed him the walkie-talkie. Every word you say will be recorded. If you dare to play any tricks, the drone will automatically shoot. Don't say I didn't warn you. Looking at Zaid nodding desperately, Jiang Chen closed the cabin door and locked it from the outside. The bloodstains on the ship had been washed clean by the rescued hostages, and the bodies were stripped of their clothes and equipment at Jiang Chen's request, thrown at the bottom of the cabin and locked, and deodorant was sprayed on the inside of the door. He had other uses for these bodies. After finishing these things, the employees of Gayux and Danshu returned to their dormitories, and the crew members without tasks also returned to their rooms. although they had not had a drop of water since the morning. After all, they had experienced such a thing, and now they had no appetite to eat. When passing the cabin, Ulrika, the Ukrainian beauty rescued by Jiang Chen, suddenly hugged him and kissed the hero who saved her fiercely. However, Jiang Chen declined the beauty's kindness because he was not in the mood to accompany her back to the dormitory. Speaking of which, she was not at the scene at the time and knew nothing about Jiang Chen's identity. If she knew that the person standing in front of her was not a special forces soldier, but the chairman of the group, I wonder if she would blush because of her little thoughts. After all, foreigners look at Chinese people's faces the same way Chinese people look at foreigners. Even if it was Gates or Jobs, if they met on the street, Jiang Chen would not recognize them if no one pointed at them. After returning to the water drop, Jiang Chen set it to automatic cruise mode and hung it behind the shipping ship not too far away. About 2 hours later, night was about to fall, and 2 black dots flew in the dim sky. 2 Black Hawk helicopters flew over one after the other, full of Sea Lion Special Forces soldiers. Amid the cheers of the hostages, these soldiers in black combat uniforms were roped down to the deck. Garrett hung his rifle on the back of the exoskeleton and walked towards Jiang Chen, who was waiting at the bow. Boss. Due to his status, Garrett just smiled bitterly and swallowed back any words like too messy. Jiang Chen looked at his equipment. Are all the equipment K2 exoskeletons? Since they were almost wiped out in Antarctica last time, the newly programmed Sea Lion Special Forces have been equipped with K2 mechanical exoskeletons produced in the military factory of the 6th district of the Apocalypse. These exoskeletons can mount more modules, including optical imaging, anti-EMP, annular nitrogen shields, etc., which are all beyond the capabilities of the K1 exoskeleton. Yes. Garrett nodded. Very good, follow me. Jiang Chen nodded and turned to walk into the cabin. This room was originally the crew mess on the ship, but now it has been converted into a temporary command center. The fully armed soldiers gathered in a circle, quietly waiting for Jiang Chen's orders. Several tables were put together, and Jiang Chen spread a map on the table, then drew 2 lines and a circle on it with a marker. 4 soldiers were executed by pirates. The mastermind behind the killing was Arrowhead Company, which also carried out the attack in Antarctica. It's just right to settle the old and new accounts together. Let's put aside the diplomatic issues. Blood debts must be paid with blood. You know what I mean. None of the soldiers spoke, but Jiang Chen could feel the high morale. Revenge for the dead comrades. For revenge. The battle plan is very simple. I will lead Team A, pretending to be pirates, to the port of Mayat Island west of Madagascar, to deliver the desalination platform. Team B, led by Garrett, will first arrive in the north of Mayat Island in a Black Hawk helicopter, and then walk around the coastline to the transaction site. We will attack them from both sides and wipe them out. Seeing Jiang Chen finished speaking, the pilot raised an objection. We don't have enough fuel on the helicopter. If we return to the frigate to resupply now, I'm afraid we won't have enough time. After a long journey, the gasoline on the helicopter is just enough for the returning frigate. If they want to raid Mayat Island from a long distance, the remaining fuel is not enough. There is oil in the ship's warehouse. Go and resupply it after the combat meeting. The ship uses heavy diesel fuel, and the Black Hawk needs number 3 jet fuel. The pilot explained to Jiang Chen. I'm talking about number 3 jet fuel. The underwater vehicle I'm on carries this type of supply. I've put it in the warehouse on the left side of the stern. Open the door. I believe you can see it. Jiang Chen said simply. The pilot looked at Jiang Chen in surprise and nodded. Jiang Chen threw the marker on the map and glanced at the 12 soldiers and 4 pilots present. Operation code, Trojan Horse. If you have any questions, ask quickly. If you don't have any questions, just say it. Led by Garrett, the soldiers stood at attention and shouted in unison. No problem. Jiang Chen clapped his hands on the map and waved his hands. Then get moving. He was responded with a sonorous answer and steps that crushed steel. Yes, sir. Chapter 818, No Chinese Allowed. It was getting dark. North of Mayat, a shipping ship slowly sailed to the fishing boat port in the northwest of the island. This place is backed by the slums that can be seen everywhere in the Republic of Madagascar. Under the rows of dilapidated brick houses and shacks, diseases, crimes, and deaths are like garbage bags, mixed in the dirty alleys. There are only two kinds of people who go here. One is the skinny poor, and the other is a strong murderer. Black children sat in groups of 3 or 5 on the edge of the dock, casting curious and vigilant eyes on the shipping ship and the offshore platform behind the shipping ship. Although the people of Arrow Company occasionally use this dock, it is the first time they have seen such a strange thing. Because of the arrival of this shipping ship, the originally messy dock has become even more chaotic. The naked black man hurried away, and several naked black mercenaries with magazines hanging on them and axe in their hands jumped onto the dock while screaming, and then gestured to the freighter. At 3 o'clock, the black guy with a hat is the secret sentry of Arrowhead Company. At 5 o'clock, the guy who is waving at me is the informant who is responsible for contacting us. His name is very long and difficult to pronounce. I usually call him Andre. Can I answer him? Be more natural. Jiang Chen, who was standing next to him, after activating optical invisibility, said softly, "Okay." Zaid forced a smile on his face that was uglier than crying, but it was not obvious under the cover of darkness. Zaid negotiated with the people on the dock and soon got permission to dock. The other party sent several sailors on board. The black man named Andre walked to Zaid happily, patted him on the shoulder, and spoke in French, which is commonly used on the island of Madagascar. "Hey, man, this is a big deal. You have to buy me a drink when you get it done. Come on, let's talk after I confirm the account." Zaid took out a cigar from his pocket and lit it, cursing. "Where is the connecting ship? Drive this thing directly into your warehouse. It will be there soon," Andre said in a friendly manner. "By the way, where is that guy Baggery? Why don't I see him? He is doing business in Somalia. He is not brought with him on this mission." Zaid said. "Where are the hostages?" "Feeding the fish." Zaid grinned cruelly. Just from this smile, Andre smelled the strong smell of blood, so he scratched his head and smiled. "Hey, just pretend I didn't ask." 2 hours ago, the frigate approached the slowed down shipping ship, and a platoon of marines boarded the shipping ship. The employees and crew of Gaox and Danshu boarded the frigate in small boats. The clothes stripped from the pirates came in handy. Standing on the side of the ship with axe were all marines from Starring Trade. The exoskeleton was tightly hidden under the rag-wrapped robes, and the Ripper rifle was hidden within easy reach. Jiang Chen tilted his head slightly and whispered to the captain, Kramer, who was dressed as a pirate. "No Chinese." The sunburned white man grinned. "Understood." Arabic. Jiang Chen nodded and gestured to Asia behind him. The two activated optical invisibility again and hid in the night. Time passed slowly, and the waiting soldiers felt like they were living a year. Several sailors confirmed the safety of the ship and the desalination platform behind the ship, and then returned to the bow. After confirming the situation, Andre stood by the side of the ship and leaned there to make several calls in a row. Soon, a cargo ship with a tonnage of more than 5,000 tons came on the sea. The freighter had obviously been modified. The deck had been cleared and there were 2 helipads with 2 Black Hawk helicopters parked on them. Soldiers in desert camouflage uniforms jumped onto the deck, and Jiang Chen, Kramer, Zaid and others were all in a rage. It was the most critical moment. These soldiers on board were obviously elite members of Arrowhead Company. If they were exposed, not only would the plan fail, but the consequences would be disastrous. Fortunately, it was dark, and Jiang Chen did not reveal any clues. Perhaps because they had cooperated with Zaid many times, the soldiers of Arrowhead Company also relaxed their vigilance. They just walked from the boat to the stern, unloaded the offshore platform from the back of the shipping ship, and connected it to their own cargo ship with a steel cable. "Where's the money?" Zaid said to the mercenary who had contact with him. "It's already been transferred to the account," the mercenary said expressionlessly. Hearing this, Zaid secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He was not worried that Arrowhead would steal his money. All he was thinking about now was that he had to quickly transfer the money from the Swiss bank to the Russian bank account. He always felt unsafe to keep his money in Europe. After all, he heard that the shareholders of Arrowhead were Europeans and belonged to a large family. After completing the delivery of the goods, the mercenaries of Arrowhead immediately returned to their ship and began to carry the desalination platform back to the ship. 2 days later, the desalination platform will be towed to Europe for German engineers to study its structure. The Arrowhead ship went away, but Zaid's clenched fists became tighter. Because he knew that once the ship left, the main show would start. The work is done. Let's go. Let's go to the island for a drink. Andre laughed and patted Zaid on the shoulder. You go first. I feel a little dizzy. Zaid pinched the bridge of his nose and pretended to be unwell, trying to send him away quickly. Haha, you are not seasick, buddy. Andre laughed strangely. Pirates get seasick? This joke is really creative. As the two of them were joking around, and the ship was slowly approaching the port, under the cover of night, an Aurora 20 quietly arrived over Mayet. Shooter 1 has arrived over the target, requesting instructions. The backward radar of the Republic of Madagascar was completely defenseless for the fighter planes of starring trade. Jiang Chen, who knew that Arrowhead Company had infiltrated the Madagascar government, did not ask those black guys for instructions on tonight's actions. He would never admit tonight's actions. Hearing the pilot's report, Jiang Chen took out a rifle from his back and said softly, "Turn off the lights for them." Got it. After cutting off the communication, Shooter 1 skillfully opened the safety cover with his fingers. Then, he pressed the red bomb button with his thumb. A black bomb attached to the belly of the aircraft separated from the Aurora 20 and accelerated towards the clouds. At the moment of contact with the cloud, the bomb suddenly exploded, and the blue electric light spread on the cloud. The high energy particles were ejected and collided with the oxygen and nitrogen atoms in the air. The entire cloud was like an electrode plate, projecting a strong instantaneous electric field to the entire Mayet Island. Is it thundering? The sound in the air caught Andre's attention. He took off his burning cigar and looked at the clear night sky. Maybe, Zaid said vaguely, and quietly distanced himself from Andre. The lights suddenly went out, and the night eroded the entire coast in an instant. What's wrong, man? Your face is a little wrong. Andre stopped talking halfway, and there was a bloody hole on his forehead. Zaid closed his eyes reluctantly, and squatted on the ground with his head in his hands. Man, I'm sorry. I had no choice. The sound of gunfire suppressed by the silencer rang out. The killing has begun. It's the end of the month, guys. If you still have votes, don't wait any longer. Please support me with your votes. In addition, book friends who have subscribed to the full book can receive the Great God's Light. I just remembered this recently. If it's not too much trouble, please help me receive it. Please. Chapter 819, Madagascar Achievements. Whoosh. A sharp whistle cut through the silence of the night. The rocket launcher blasted into the steel armor, and sparks like welding shot out from the other side of the ASV-150 light armored vehicle. The flames of the explosion lifted the turret into the sky. The mercenary leaning against the armored vehicle was blown to the ground in the grass nearby, and he rolled and crawled to the bunker. Because the steel armor itself is similar to an imperfect Faraday cage, it has a strong resistance to the electric field passing through it. The strategic level imp bomb with a wide range of attack only paralyzed the communication radio hanging outside the car, and did not burn the electronic components in the armored vehicle. However, it escaped the disaster, but it was obviously not lucky enough to continue. The Sea Lion Special Forces flashed out of the night, relying on the optical stealth module mounted on the K2 exoskeleton, wandering on the battlefield covered with gunpowder like an invisible ghost. The mercenaries of Arrow Company could only fight in a panic, and all unprotected electronic equipment failed, including night vision goggles and infrared sights for night battles. At the same time, the Arrow Company's headquarters at the Mayet military base was also in complete chaos. Sometimes the attack came from the north, sometimes from the west, but they didn't even know how many enemies there were. Even because the radio failed, 2 infantry squads fought with their own people in the alley outside the slum. This is the Mayet military base. This is the Mayet military base. We are under attack. Repeat, we are under attack. Damn it. Colonel Mangala slammed the phone on the table, grabbed a rifle from the table, and rushed out the door. The base was on fire, and the gunfire was approaching the barracks of the military base. This was no longer a place to stay for long, and he had to evacuate. If he could evacuate. Just 10 minutes ago, or thunder resounded over Mayet Island. Then there was a large-scale power outage. Not only the power outage, but also mobile phones, computers, walkie-talkies, all electronic products were out of function. Traffic was in chaos, and even the cars with brake failures collided crookedly. All the vehicles on the road have become scraps. Except for the windows and door locks, all functions have lost their original functions. Due to large-scale short circuits, many places with backward firefighting have even caught fire. An imp bomb has returned the entire Mayad Island to the Stone Age. Although before this bomb, this island, which is less than half the size of Wanhei City, has not developed much. The Battle of Team B has begun, and the Battle of Team A has also started at the dock. At the moment of the EMP explosion, all the light bulbs in the slums went out, and the entire dock suddenly fell into darkness. The shipping ship was also within the EMP attack range, and the lights on the deck suddenly went out. However, the exoskeleton on the soldier's body was not affected except for a moment when the explosion occurred. It was Jiang Chen who fired the first shot and killed Andrew, who was standing next to Zaid. After receiving the signal to attack, the Marines disguised as pirates immediately raised their AK-47s and fired. After the magazine was emptied, they threw it aside directly and then picked up the Ripper rifle at hand and continued to fire. Several black sentinels on the dock were killed on the spot, and the black refugees in the slums screamed and fled. The people from Arrowhead Company crouched behind the bunkers in a panic and fired back at the ship. Some of them were mercenaries of Arrowhead Company, some were peripheral personnel employed by Arrowhead Company, and some were gangsters and local snakes with whom they had interests. Bullets flew across the dark dock. Although these rabble had a large number of people, their shooting skills and tactics were terrible. How could they beat the starring Marines who had just participated in the joint military exercise between Singapore and Malaysia? The only thing that caused some trouble to Jiang Chen was a few RPGs fired on the cabin. However, it can only be said that these people were too naive to think that they could sink this thousands of tons of shipping ship with a few RPGs. The drone was released and pounced on the black soldiers behind the bunker, setting off a bloody storm. The Marines tore off the robes draped over their exoskeletons, jumped onto the dock, and fired their rifles as they charged into the slums. Anyone with a weapon will be shot dead. I repeat, anyone with a weapon will be shot dead. Captain Kramer of the Marines shouted loudly on the communication screen, and at the same time, commanded the soldiers to attack the base established by Arrowhead Company in the slums in 3 directions. Jiang Chen did not personally go into battle. After firing the first shot, he sat on the side of the ship, looking at the slums with flickering flames, and became a bystander of the battlefield battle. Aisha walked to the side, letting the sea breeze mess up her hair, and quietly accompanied him. Zaid climbed up from the deck carefully, wiped the sweat and blood off his face, and squeezed out a few dry smiles to Jiang Chen. Where are you going to let me off the ship? Right here, but before that, I need you to do one last thing for me. Jiang Chen said with a smile. Zaid felt a little uneasy from Jiang Chen's smile, but he couldn't tell why he felt uneasy. After all, the man in front of him was smiling so warmly. The fighting in the slums gradually subsided. From the sporadic gunshots and resistance, one could already hear the tenuous fate of Arrowhead Company. Zaid followed Jiang Chen, boarded the dock, and then came to a tiled house in the slums. In the corner, he saw the instructor and officer of Arrowhead Company, Colonel Mangala, who was shot in the legs and lost his ability to move. This American, who had participated in the Iran-Iraq war, had once drank with him arm in arm, but now he was leaning there like a dead dog, covered in blood. It's you, Zaid. Mangala held his last breath, pressed the wound on his leg tightly, and grinned. I didn't expect it. I really didn't expect it. It seems that the boss has fed a jackal that he can't tame. Zaid didn't look at his eyes. Although he never cared about honor and dignity in the pirate business, he was still full of guilt for killing so many friends. Jiang Chen didn't care what they were talking about in French, but handed Zaid a dagger. Kill him, and you will be our companion. Zaid took the dagger, and Jiang Chen raised the gun and pointed it at him. The message conveyed by this gesture was very clear. If you don't kill him, you will be our enemy. Come on, look me in the eyes and kill me. Mangala's eyes were red, and he stared at Zaid with a stiff neck. Knowing that he was going to die, Mangala chose to die quickly. Zaid swallowed his saliva, thinking that he had already offended Arrowhead Company and their boss behind the scenes, so this life didn't matter. So, he made up his mind, picked up the dagger, and slashed it hard against Mangala's neck. At the same time, he silently said in his heart, brother, I'm sorry. However, this inner monologue was not completed. At the moment, when his dagger crossed Mangala's throat, blood spurted out of his chest and sprinkled on his former friend. It was his own blood. Strength began to drain away along the blood hole in his chest. Zaid stood there in a daze, bent down, and looked at his chest. Jiang Chen lowered the smoking muzzle of the gun in his hand, with a cold smile on his face. Zaid used up his last strength, turned around, and stared at Jiang Chen. The look seemed to be saying, "Why?" I said, "To me you are just an ant. If you are not even a dog, how can you be a companion?" From the moment he ordered the execution of the 4 starring soldiers, he was doomed to die. Everyone must die. Pay the price for your actions. Jiang Chen put away his gun casually, made a neat gesture to the soldier next to him, and then turned and left the alley. The soldier understood, walked forward, and hit Zaid's face with the butt of the gun, knocking him unconscious. Then he grabbed his collar and dragged him to the side of the officer named Mangala, and at the same time, returned the pistol on his waist to the dead colonel. The two died together, as if they died from cannibalism. Before the last trace of consciousness was annihilated, Zaid vaguely heard such words floating from outside the alley. "Drag the bodies of the pirates off the boat, put new clothes on them, and dump them here. Throw some in the corners of the slums as well, and don't forget to give everyone an ack. Move quickly, the Madagascar government is about to react. Evacuate immediately in 5 minutes." Chapter 820. Trojan Horse. Towing the desalination platform snatched from starring trade, the armed and modified ship slowly sailed to the port in the northwest corner of Madagascar Island. At the end of the jungle and the mountains, there is a fortress that is inconsistent with the poverty of Madagascar. Inside the tall concrete wall, there are dozens of little birds, black hawks, and even Apache attack helicopters parked. In addition, the number of M1114 and M2A3 infantry fighting vehicles parked in the garage even exceeds that of many US military bases overseas. And the Patriot 3 missile launcher hidden by the cover further demonstrates the military and political influence of Arrowhead Company. Such a terrifying armed force can even easily overthrow a small country, which is simply not the combat power that an ordinary private military contractor may have. It is precisely because of its own strength that the US government is wary of it. Even though the Freemasons have a good influence in the US political circles, their military bases can only be built overseas, such as backward Africa or chaotic South America. The freighter entered the port, and the officer wearing a desert-colored military cap walked down the stairs from the freighter. At the port, a bald middle-aged man in a suit stretched out his hand from a distance and greeted him cheerfully. "Ha ha ha, welcome, Colonel Fellner. Nice to meet you, Mr. Evans." Fellner shook the hand that was stretched out and shook it up and down solemnly. From the look on the colonel's face, he was very respectful to Mr. Evans. This respect was not because of social status, but was constrained by an older class. In Freemasonry, lower level members must address their superiors as mentors. Although in modern times, this rule is no longer so strictly enforced, and only at gatherings within the Freemasonry will people use the retro honorific title of mentor. But this does not prevent Fellner from respecting the old man in front of him. As an ordinary member of the Freemasonry, Fellner's level is only 3rd degree. The old man in a suit standing opposite him had a ring on his right hand with the number 32 engraved on it, which was only one level away from the highest level 33 in the Scottish party. The engineers boarded the ship and unloaded the desalination platform from the back of the ship. Evans did not have any trouble. He smiled casually and pulled Fellner aside, handed him a cigar, and lit one for himself. Our homeland has a long and narrow coastline, but is extremely short of fresh water. We have negotiated with the people of Gay Oaks in fresh water, but they are very stingy with precious technology. We are very disappointed. The homeland here naturally refers to Israel. When talking about being very disappointed, Evans blew a smoke ring, grinned, and patted Fellner on the shoulder. But fortunately, we have a group of brave guys. The future group will soon regret rejecting us. Zaid is finished. I'm afraid we have to find someone to do the dirty work for us again. Fellner grinned. Someone must bear the wrath of the future group. Evans and Fariner did not believe that they dared to take action against the Freemasons. Then the only people that the future group could retaliate against were the pirates in Somalia. But then again, it was not certain whether Jiang Chen could find out who was behind the scenes. Thinking of this, Evans smiled. He shook the cigar, and the 1-inch long ash fell on the side of his shoes. Evans blew out a smoke ring and looked in the direction of the desalination platform with a deep eagle-like gaze. Zed won't survive tomorrow night. Mossad will take action to wipe out his idiot in Somalia and then wait for him to come to us. As long as Zed, who knows the truth, dies, and the credit for the suppression of the bandits is given to the Somali government, the future group will never find any clues. In a month, Mediterranean freshwater will be listed in New York and officially develop the Middle East market. We will use the influence of the oil market to snatch the market share of freshwater from the eastern coast of the Mediterranean to the Persian Gulf from geogs in freshwater. Looking forward to a bright future. Evans smiled and then looked at Ferner next to him. Speaking of which, have you inspected the goods? No, but this is equipment that was directly shipped to the Red Sea for deployment, so there shouldn't be any quality problems. Ferner smiled. Let's deploy it first. Anyway, I heard that this thing is very convenient to move. Evans grinned and pointed to the location by the dock with his cigar. He was about to say something to the soldier next to him, but soon he was attracted by the light. On the sea not far away, the offshore platform began to glow. The light, like a solid object, leaked from the cracks in the mechanical shell. Even from a distance of hundreds of meters, one could feel the heat that tore the skin. The steel was melted into molten iron. The armored vehicles and helicopters all lost their colors under the strong light. The cement peeled off the steel skeleton and collapsed like an avalanche. It is said that at the moment of death, that second will be infinitely stretched until consciousness is completely extinguished. In the moment before losing consciousness, Evans seemed to see the sunrise. The so-called beautiful future was blown to ashes in the halo of this sunrise along with the cigar between his fingers. The shockwave swept through the mountains and forests, dyeing all the green with black. On the clear sea, a mushroom cloud rose. Zizzy. This is Crow 1. We have arrived above Mayet. It is pitch black here, with only sporadic fire. Received. Landing. After Jiang Chen and others evacuated, 4 transport helicopters took off from the Air Force Base in the Republic of Madagascar and flew over Mayet. All communication channels were cut off. When they learned that the entire Mayet Island had lost contact, the officials of Madagascar thought it was a joke. After all, the incident happened late at night and the problem sounded a bit incredible. It was not until time passed that various departments realized this paralyzed tow and sent troops to the island to investigate the situation. Army soldiers landed in the slums by transport helicopters, but saw a devastated scene. The walls were full of bullet holes and traces of explosives. Blood was everywhere. Most of them belonged to the local black forces and mercenaries of Arrowhead Military Company, and of course some belonged to civilians in the slums. It's pirates. They attacked us. The rescued black boy shouted in shock. Blood marks from stray bullets could be seen on his arms, and deep scars on his thighs were seen on the bones. He was carried on a stretcher. The scene was in chaos, with crying and shouting. The rescue team that landed first was busy and exhausted. While reporting the situation to the headquarters and requesting support, they also treated the wounded who could be saved. Ah. Don't move, man. You will be fine. My leg. Ah. Who has a bandage? Give me one. Quick. At the same time, in the presidential palace of Madagascar, officials from various departments were in chaos. President Rajona put on a suit over his pajamas and rushed to the office. He was anxiously contacting the people of Arrowhead Company, but the phone was always busy. Rajona hung up the phone fiercely. At this time, the Minister of Electricity of Madagascar walked in. A large-scale power outage occurred on Mayet. According to the diagnosis of the accident, the circuits in various places have been burned to varying degrees. As for the cause of the burning, it is not clear at the moment. Keep checking. Yes. Seeing that the president was in a bad mood, the Minister of Electricity did not dare to say much. He nodded and immediately turned around to prepare to go out. Wait. After being called, the Minister of Electricity asked with trepidation, "Any other instructions? Call the Minister of Defense to me." At this moment, the door was pushed open suddenly, and the Minister of Defense, who had not even tied his belt, trotted in, looked at Rajona in panic, and stammered, "Nuclear. What the hell?" Rajona frowned. With a twisted black face, the Minister of Defense said that sentence incoherently with an expression that he was about to cry. Yes, it's nuclear weapons. The northern part of Madagascar has been attacked by tactical nuclear weapons. Chapter 821. Aftermath of tactical nuclear explosion. The office was completely silent. President Rajona and the Minister of Electricity were completely frozen there. The silence lasted for half a minute, and the president sat back in his seat trembling, rubbing his forehead with his fingers. Sorry, I may not have heard it clearly, you. The Minister of Defense repeated it quickly. It was a tactical nuclear bomb. It exploded at the headquarters of Arrowhead Military Company, and the entire coast was bombed into ruins. The nearby forest caught fire, and our firefighters have entered the forest to put out the fire. Fortunately, their headquarters is far away from the city, and there are no civilian casualties. We have not yet announced it to the media. After a while, Rajona finally accepted this fact, sighed, and said with a headache, "Evacuate the civilians in the villages and towns near the forest. The nuclear bomb has been suppressed in advance, at least until tonight. But those firefighters," the Minister of Defense said with difficulty, "the country will remember their contributions." Yes. The Minister of Defense nodded and left the office with a grim look on his face. Continue to investigate the cause of the power outage in Mayat and the identity of the person who fought with Arrowhead. Rajona took a deep breath and said to the Minister of Power, "You go and do your work first." Yes. The Minister of Power nodded and turned and walked away. The truth cannot be hidden. Jiang Chen got off the boat in Koro Island and fell asleep in his villa. When he woke up, there was a big fight outside about nuclear weapons. Although it was a tactical nuclear bomb with a limited killing range, it was more than enough to wipe out a military base. The news of the tactical nuclear bomb attack in northern Madagascar has been all over the international dashboard. And the name of Arrowhead, a private military contractor, also appeared in the public eye for the first time. They were hired by the United States and had traveled to other countries many times to perform tasks that the United States was not convenient to directly take action on. For example, rescue of important personnel, anti-terrorism operations, planning a coup, and a series of tasks that can be seen or not seen in the light. And now, all of this has been exposed to the public. Moreover, as to why Arrowhead Corporation possessed tactical nuclear bombs at its military base in Madagascar, media both inside and outside Madagascar unanimously condemned this military company registered in the United States. For a time, the international community was in turmoil because of this nuclear bomb. Why was a nuclear bomb transported into our country? How many nuclear bombs are there in our country that were brought in by these Americans without our knowledge? Madagascar Cable TV: all actions of Arrowhead Corporation are private actions, and the White House said it was unaware of this. When the media asked why Arrowhead Military Corporation possessed nuclear weapons, the White House spokesman used the word shocked and unbelievable. The Madagascar nuclear weapons incident once again exposed how stupid the military outsourcing strategy that the Democratic Party has been promoting for more than a decade is. Washington Post: the South African government solemnly protested the United States' deployment of nuclear weapons in Africa in all forms, and expressed concern that private possession of nuclear weapons may lead to the escalation of terrorism. At present, the African Union is holding an emergency meeting at the African Union Conference Center in the capital of Ethiopia, and has started a dialogue with the White House on the Madagascar nuclear issue. South Africa Morning Post Arrow said that the nuclear weapons were not held by the company, but were related to Starring Trade. But when asked about the evidence, the Arrow spokesperson avoided the question. Starring Trade responded to Arrow's unfounded accusation with the word absurd, and questioned Arrow's logic in making such an accusation. Hong Kong Daily: everything is a mess. First, there was the gunfight on Mayat Island. Next to the dead Arrow officer Mangala, the body of the international wanted criminal Zaid was found. It has been confirmed that Mangala was killed by Zaid, and the reason is not yet known. Based on the analysis of the clues left at the scene and the bodies of some of the attackers at the scene being confirmed to be Somali pirates, the attack was finally identified as a gunfight between Somali pirates and Arrow. And just 5 hours after the attack, the Somali government announced that, with the cooperation of the Israeli intelligence department, the Somali government forces had completed the siege of the pirate organization led by Zaid. In connection with the Jewish background behind Arrow, it is difficult not to link these two events together. Regarding the large-scale destruction of electronic equipment on Mayotte, experts have only made a lot of speculations, but have not been able to make a specific conclusion. Some speculate that it is due to sunspot activity and geomagnetic phenomena, while others speculate that Arrowhead Company is researching new weapons on Mayotte. But no one has linked it to Starring Trade, which is far away in the Pacific Ocean. Although Starring Trade used EMP rockets in the Battle of Mindanao and carried out regional EMP strikes on the Philippine Army, it cannot be linked to the phenomenon on Mayotte in terms of scope or intensity. What's more, EMP weapons are in the laboratory stage in various countries, and only high-altitude nuclear explosions can produce wide-area electromagnetic pulse effects. However, the gamma value on Mayotte is normal, and the nuclear explosion only occurred at Arrowhead Company's military base on Madagascar. As for the nuclear explosion, Arrowhead Company has not been able to explain it so far. It is true that the tactical nuclear bomb is Jiang Chen's masterpiece, and he personally installed it inside the desalination platform. However, except for Arrowhead Company and Jiang Chen, there is no evidence to prove this. Not to mention that, because it was at the center of the explosion, the desalination platform of Xinghuan Trade had been blown up, and even the steel was melted into molten iron, sinking into the sea, and the slag could not be fished out. Even if it was proven that the nuclear bomb was hidden on the desalination platform, why would someone else's desalination platform be here? This is simply unexplainable. All the evidence was taken to the grave because of Zaid's death. Even if Arrowhead Company intends to tear its face off and tell all the media and reporters that the shipping ship of Starring Trading was hijacked by its own people, but no one would believe their nonsense that they hid a nuclear bomb in the desalination platform. Zaid died on Mayotte Island, next to Officer Mangala, and the clues were completely cut off here. It was Zaid who led the pirates to attack Arrowhead Company's base on Mayotte Island, and it had nothing to do with Starring Trading at all. Moreover, just 10 hours after the incident, Starring Trading announced to the media that the shipping ship was hijacked and that the Starring Navy had completed the rescue across the Indian Ocean. All reporters saw that when the shipping ship returned to the port of Koro Island, a desalination platform was tied to the back. The teeth that were knocked out can only be swallowed into the stomach. This is the current situation facing Arrowhead Company. However, Jiang Chen knew that the Freemasons hiding behind the scenes would definitely not bear to swallow their teeth, and they would definitely do something. At least divert the attention of the international community. Throwing the newspaper aside, Jiang Chen took a sip of the coffee brought by Asia, and then called Santos, the president of Morocco. Before he spoke, Santos asked nervously, "Did you do that in Africa?" It was great news that the allies had nuclear weapons, but Jiang Chen obviously did not intend to talk more about this issue. "It's none of your business." Jiang Chen did not answer his question directly. Strengthen the defense of the northern border. Although I have been emphasizing this, I have to emphasize it again now. Because the war has already started. Started a war. Santos was stunned. That's right. After a pause, Jiang Chen continued, "Mindanao will be the front line of the fight between the Freemasons and the future group. You'd better be mentally prepared." This statement is really a bit infuriating. Santos smiled bitterly. "But there is nothing we can do about it." Jiang Chen took a sip of coffee and continued slowly, "If you still want to continue to be the dictator, then you have to fight them. If you don't want to be one anymore, please remember to tell me in advance." Santos took a deep breath. "I know what to do." "Very good. Then Starring Trade will always support you." "Thank you." "You're welcome." Chapter 822 Two Funerals. The next morning, at the cemetery on Koro Island, Jiang Chen, as the chairman of Starring Trade, attended the funeral of the 4 fallen soldiers. Starring Trade reported on the hijacking of the ship by pirates, and stated that all the hostages had been rescued and all the pirates had been killed on the spot. 4 Starring Trade bodyguards died in the line of duty. Jiang Chen personally attended the funeral of the 4 soldiers, and handed over the medals of honor and pensions to the families of the fallen soldiers. At the funeral, after reading the eulogy, Jiang Chen briefly spoke to the media about the pirate hijacking of the ship. Starring Trade will not compromise with any evil forces, absolutely and never. No matter how much sacrifice is made, no matter what means are used, no matter whether the provocation comes from pirates or anything else, we will protect our citizens at all costs. Let us remember those warriors who sacrificed for peace. Applause broke out from the audience. After the speech, the reporter immediately stepped forward and handed over the microphone. Mr. Jiang Chen, as the chairman of Starring Trade, what do you think of what Mr. Smith, the president of Arrowhead, pointed out about the connection between the nuclear explosion in Madagascar and Starring Trade? I have no opinion on the unreasonable remarks. And on this sad day, I don't want to make any comments on events that have nothing to do with Starring Trade. But if the CEO of Arrowhead is interested, I recommend him to go to the Coral Island Psychiatric Hospital for treatment. There was some good-natured laughter from the crowd. Although they knew it was not appropriate to laugh at a funeral, Jiang Chen's words still amused these foreign reporters. Obviously, they also did not believe that there was a connection between Starring Trade and nuclear bombs. After all, it has only been a few months since New Zealand mastered civilian nuclear technology. Even if they ignored the gap between civilian-grade nuclear technology and military-grade nuclear technology, and secretly replaced all the light water reactors of the Coral Island nuclear power plant with heavy water reactors, it would not be possible to gather enough plutonium needed to make nuclear weapons in time. People are more willing to believe that it was Arrowhead that deployed nuclear weapons in Madagascar. As for whether the United States was behind this, it is unknown. On the emerald green lawn, the honor guards stood with guns on their chests and fired 3 shots into the sky. Surrounded by people, the coffin with the new national flag was carried into the cemetery for burial. The military band played the solemn and passionate national anthem, which seemed particularly tragic and majestic under the crying of the families of the fallen soldiers. The ceremony was almost over. If he continued to stay here, he would have to deal with the endless interviews of those reporters. Jiang Chen nodded to Aisha beside him, then turned and walked towards his car. The accompanying bodyguards blocked the reporters for him until the retro black car drove away. Neither the White House nor the Pentagon had a precedent of covering up for private military contractors. The White House spokesman insisted that he had no knowledge of it, and at the same time, told the public that he would strictly investigate Arrowhead's assets in the United States to ensure that there were no nuclear weapons not controlled by the government in the United States. The accountability that could be known to the public was almost over. As for the subsequent impact of this incident, it is still fermenting under the deliberate promotion of the online media under the Future Group. At this moment, in a manor far away in the suburbs of Bavaria, Germany, members of the Freemasons are holding a secret meeting. Even in today's highly developed internet, they still maintain the tradition of mysticism and rely on ancient doctrines to maintain a covenant that is stronger than blood. Sitting at the round conference table, the white-haired old man sitting at the head of the table, wearing a religious MC robe, read out this opening speech in a sad and solemn tone. 2 days ago, on the island of Madagascar, we lost 2 compatriots. Mr. Farron, a 3rd-degree member, and Evans, a 32nd-degree member. Their deaths are heavy losses for the Freemasons. We will not be blinded by hatred, and we will never let go of any enemy who killed our compatriots. The Future Group will pay the price for their stupidity. As a punishment, I propose to send the gatekeeper to Asia. At this point, the old man paused and looked at Carmen sitting on the left seat. The new head of the Rothschild family. Do you have any opinions? 12 eyes looked at him, but Carmen's expression did not change. She leaned back in her chair and smiled. No opinions, Mr. Lord. The Rothschild family has many friends, but in front of the core interests, no one can be called a friend. The old man nodded and placed his right hand on the table. The golden ring on his dry finger shone in the light of the candle. Then, let's start voting. 13 hands were placed on the table, representing the 13 families at the core of power in the old world. They unanimously passed the proposal of the Lord. The old man nodded with satisfaction, and then looked at the door. The man standing at the door nodded slightly, turned around and disappeared into the door shrouded in darkness, as if he had never been there. The old man retracted his gaze. Since the war has begun, let's carry out the ceremony to the end. Everyone raised their right hands and solemnly repeated the oath that had been repeated 10,000 times in ancient Hebrew. The candles on the wall flickered. In the dim light, the 13 rings facing upwards were all engraved with the number 33. 3 days had passed since the hijacking of the shipping ship. Jiang Chen was sitting in the study of the villa as usual, flipping through the book he hadn't finished. At this time, there was a knock on the door from Natasha. As for why Jiang Chen knew it so clearly, it was because Aisha knocked on the door as softly as a cat. If a cat could knock on the door. "Come in." Jiang Chen sighed, and as he spoke, he stuffed the bookmark into the book and casually placed it on the corner of the table. Natasha strode in, and as Jiang Chen expected, she brought up the incident straight to the point. "You went too far." "Go too far?" Jiang Chen smiled, got up from his chair, and walked to the window of the study. "In Antarctica, they sent a whole battalion of elite soldiers to besiege me. At that time, they didn't consider whether they went too far. The war had already begun, not just a war in the sense of bullets. If one side naively thought that the two sides could coexist, that would be truly naive. The new world must be reborn in the flames of the old world. Both the Freemasons and the WASP consortium will eventually become the enemies of the future group, but the oldest should die first. Hijacking a shipping ship? It's just a stupid temptation. Starting from the most marginal interests of the future group, with Jiang Chen's compromise, take away the building blocks of this building bit by bit, and gradually reach out to more core interests. However, Jiang Chen did not intend to compromise from the beginning. Natasha raised her eyebrows. "It was you who did the Madagascar thing." "I didn't say anything." Jiang Chen shrugged, looked at the drones building the garden outside the window, and said with a smile. Natasha stared at Jiang Chen's back speechlessly, not knowing what to say at this moment. She didn't know whether he was confident that the trump card in his hand would never lose, or because of his current achievements, that led to blind arrogance. Many people once thought that they could defeat the Ancient Alliance, but those geniuses who once stood at the crossroads of history all eventually stepped into the abyss of hell. From Napoleon to Hitler, they were undoubtedly geniuses in terms of war alone. "Can you answer a question for me?" Jiang Chen asked abruptly, looking at his reflection in the window, which overlapped with Natasha's. "It's the last day of July. Everyone check your votes, and if you still have monthly tickets, please vote for me. Tomorrow will be another 5 update burst. I'm going to go right now." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 823, A Sharp Turn for the Worse. "What's the problem?" Natasha raised her eyebrows. "Was it the KGB's order to remind me that I had gone too far, or was it your decision to act on your own?" Jiang Chen said with a smile. Natasha was speechless for a moment. The atmosphere in the room was a little subtle. After a moment of silence, she slowly spoke. "In the last contact with the KGB intelligence chief, the chief used the word ally in relation to the future group. Based on the existing intelligence, I judge that it was necessary to remind you of your behavior. If we lose you as an ally, our lives will not be easy." After hearing Natasha's words, Jiang Chen almost laughed out loud. What is this? When did the Russians learn the art of tsundere? From the first time he met Natasha in Ukraine to now, this was the first time he felt amused by her poor cover-up. "What are you laughing at?" Natasha frowned. "Nothing, I just suddenly feel a little, well," Jiang Chen coughed lightly, restraining his frivolous expression. "I should take this matter seriously. It's better to do so." Natasha paused, then continued. "The Freemasons have sent a gatekeeper, and he should have arrived to Asia now." "What is a gatekeeper?" Jiang Chen asked. "We don't know very well." Natasha shook her head. "We only know that there are many gatekeepers. Some are responsible for the layout of the gathering venue, some are responsible for controlling the gates of the venue from inside and outside, and some are responsible for issuing certificates to new members. As for the meaning of what he represents, there is a saying that he holds a sharp unsheathed sword, and there is also a saying that he guards the door to the all-seeing eye. No matter what he represents, it's impossible that he is here to issue me a membership card, right?" Jiang Chen interrupted with a smile. "That's right." Natasha nodded. He is a killer, a banker, a general, or just a soldier, or even just an attitude of declaring war. Holding a sharp unsheathed sword, if it belongs to this meaning, it might be more appropriate to call him a cleaner. Jiang Chen thought so as he looked at the drone trimming branches outside the window. The nuclear issue in Madagascar continued to ferment. In addition to the boiling anti-American sentiment in the country, protests and demonstrations continued to break out in the capital and Antananarivo. People held high slogans to expel Arrowhead and even American companies, and hastily attributed the tragedy on Mayotte and the tragedy of the nuclear explosion on the mainland to the conspiracy of the United States. The BBC reporter repeatedly clarified that he was British and finally got the opportunity to interview the demonstrators without being beaten. It was the Americans who brought in the pirates. Their policies in Somalia have caused the remnants of the Beledweyne warlords to retaliate. Flies will always chase shit. Drive American companies out of Madagascar. Why does Arrowhead have nuclear weapons? What do they think our country is? An African arsenal? Can we still trust them? Get out of Madagascar. Young people shouted slogans in French, surrounded the US Embassy and Arrowhead's headquarters, and burned the stars and stripes. Now every military outpost of Arrowhead Company on the island was forced to temporarily close, and the US Embassy had to close down. Although the internet penetration rate on Madagascar is not high, there is still a lot of room for the future group to operate. Once a certain public opinion forms a wind direction, and there is a banner of patriotism to make the wind direction stand, then this hurricane will be easily manipulated and blow away everything without reason. Under pressure from the country and Congress, Madagascar President Rajona, who tends to cooperate with the Freemasons, had to change his previous strategy and urge Arrowhead Company to evacuate from Madagascar. At the same time, Jiang Chen, who was far away on Koro Island, also began to step up preparations for this war. Since the KGB can guess that he did it, the CIA will not fail to guess it either. The United States did not make any accusations because they had no evidence to directly prove this. In other words, even the US intelligence department itself was skeptical of this inference. Compared with the new country, Israel's secret possession of nuclear weapons has long been an open secret. We will protect your industries in North and South America, but in Europe, I'm sorry, our capabilities are limited. Rocky's voice was very polite, and even when he refused, it was hard to make people feel unhappy. It's okay, I've helped a lot, Jiang Chen said naturally. Jiang Chen was not surprised that his request was rejected. After all, it's okay to expect businessmen to be honest, but it's ridiculous to expect them to be loyal. But it's impossible to say that there is no disappointment at all. Obviously, although the alliance was formed earlier, the WASP consortium hoped that the future group would play the role of a pawn. Before the situation is decided, they will watch the fire from the other side. No matter which side falls, the other side will also be seriously injured. This result is not a loss for them. WASP is willing to provide protection for the future group's industries in the Americas, so this result is not too bad. However, this also means that the future group's industry in Europe may face heavy losses, as it is now the Jewish base. It was not beyond Jiang Chen's expectations. On the second day after the funeral of the 4 soldiers, the future group's European branch received an inquiry letter from the European Commission regarding the antitrust investigation, requiring future technology to open source a virtual reality system so that European internet companies can enter the market more fairly. The future group also responded strongly to this. On the day of receiving the antitrust investigation, the future group headquarters announced that it would suspend the provision of virtual reality network services to EU countries. However, unlike the last decision in the United States, the quantum communication satellite launched by Starring Trade since last year has now been able to achieve global coverage. In name, the future group has suspended the provision of virtual reality network services to EU countries, but Europeans can still access the virtual reality network through the node in Tunisia, unless the EU confiscates all helmets in European homes, but this is obviously unrealistic. After more than 2 years of development, the Phantom helmet has already had a good market share in developed countries such as Europe. Even if the European Commission prohibits the sale of Phantom helmets in Europe, it will not affect future technologies business in Europe in a short period of time. Salaries are paid as usual, and work is as usual. This is the current situation of Future Technologies' European branch. In Tunisia, a small country with a population of only more than 10 million in the northernmost part of Africa, the number of phantom helmets connected has exceeded 200 million in a few days. In addition to the huge loss of tax revenue, the Freemason-led European Commission did not get any benefits. On the other hand, the EU has filed a double anti-dumping investigation on the solid-state lithium-ion battery of future heavy industry. This move almost forced pure electric vehicle companies such as Luca to go bankrupt, because the batteries used in their brand pure electric vehicles are all imported from future heavy industry. As for such a result, Jiang Chen's approach is very straightforward. He directly asked Luca Automobile Company to close the European factory and build the factory in the new Malaysia Special Zone. As trade frictions gradually escalate, future heavy industries robot Xiaolin, Dragoon X1 Core and other products have also been investigated by environmental protection agencies, human rights organizations, and the European Commission. Under the instigation of the Freemasons, these organizations issued a sky-high fine to the Future Group. The police holding the court summons all looked like they were going to get you. Jiang Chen knew very well that the Future Group had already lost Europe. Chapter 824, Massive Layoffs. At the Future Group building, Jiang Chen came to work as usual. It had been 2 weeks since the funeral of the 4 soldiers. At least Koro Island had returned to peace, and at least tourists who came to the island could no longer feel the tense atmosphere of the past. The only difference was that the security around the airport and the dock had been strengthened. The number of patrol drones stationed near the Future building had also increased to twice the usual number. Future Heavy Industry had been recruiting people, and the production line at the arsenal in the Anger Island Industrial Park had been running non-stop. Walking into Jiang Chen's office, Xiao gently placed a stack of documents on the corner of the table. The company's financial report for last month is out. Don't you want to take a look? Just tell me if it's positive or negative. Last month, the company's total revenue was $4.7 billion, a year-on-year decline of 13.7% from the previous month. If the situation does not improve next month, it may decline by about 4 to 5 points again. Xiao paused, then continued. After all, we have lost the whole of Europe. Jiang Chen picked up the financial report and looked through it. Do you have any good suggestions? Lay off employees in the European branch. Xiao said without hesitation. It may cause a loss of talent. Jiang Chen disagreed with this view. Senior and technical personnel retain normal salaries, and grassroots employees are suspended from work without pay. This will cut a lot of expenses for us. I don't deny that Future Group can indeed support these employees, but if we lose the European market for a long time, we must make longer term plans. We don't even rule out temporarily closing the European branch, retaining only one office to maintain patents and trademarks, and moving the entire company's senior management to Penglai City or Koro Island headquarters. Xiao's judgment was not wrong. She made the judgment based on the CEO of Future Group. If the European Commission is determined to fight against Future Group to the end, then Future Group will be unable to move forward in the European market, and basically have no means of counterattack. There are precedents in the international community. In the second half of 2013, the European Commission launched a double anti-dumping investigation on 3 Chinese photovoltaic companies. Even though the EU's decision at the time lacked legal basis and violated the spirit of free trade that Western countries have always advocated, the sanctions decision was eventually implemented. Affected by this, 3 photovoltaic companies were forced to withdraw from the MIP agreement and were charged a high tariff of 47%. After the ruling came out, Zhongsheng and Zhuhu, 2 photovoltaic companies, announced that they would no longer ship to Europe from China and shift the market focus to China, Japan, and South Korea. If the resistance comes from the policy side, then the company has no way out at all. Since you have to leave sooner or later, you might as well leave directly, lay off hundreds of thousands of people, and take the executives and technical talents with you. Seeing that Jiang Chen did not make a decision, Xiao sighed and continued. At this stage, Future human biologicals nutritional mixture is under investigation by the European Food Safety Authority, EFSA, and the results of the investigation will be released in a week. From the current situation, although Taoming has held press conferences continuously, claiming that there is no problem with the nutritional mixture, and even drank 2 bottles on the spot, the final investigation results may be unfavorable to us. If it were before, Jiang Chen would probably stand up and greet the ancestors of the European Commission before deciding to lay off employees. But now, he is surprisingly calm, although the result is the same. Issuing new country visas to executives and technical personnel, as well as resettlement allowances. Those who are willing to follow the job transfer will have their wages increased by 20%. Those who are unwilling to follow the job transfer will be given 2 years of paid leave first. The tax rate in the new country is different from that in Europe, which has high taxes and high welfare. Even if the wages remain unchanged, these European employees who immigrate to the new country can get much higher wages than working in Europe. Taking a deep breath, Jiang Chen paused for a moment and crossed his fingers on the table. Except for Future Bank, all 315,000 grassroots employees of the group's subsidiaries in the EU will be laid off. With 315,000 employees, the salary of Future Group alone is close to $1 billion per month. Layoffs are commonplace in the capitalist world, and the Future Group will not be criticized morally. However, I'm afraid that the EU countries will not feel good about it. After all, there are more than 300,000 unemployed people all of a sudden. Even if it is shared by each country, it is not very good. This is the case in high welfare countries. The unemployed have to be supported by the government. As for the UK, let's wait and see for now. Jiang Chen continued. The UK is no longer in the EU and has not responded to the Freemasons' butchering of the Future Group. However, if the UK also follows suit and attacks the Future Group, Jiang Chen does not care because he has already given up the European market. At least before the Freemasons collapse, he does not plan to return. Yes. Sun Jiao nodded, turned around and left the office. The European Commission is feasting on the Future Group, and anyone with a discerning eye can see that the EU is determined to copy Jiang Chen's home in Europe. However, just 3 days before the EFSA's investigation results on the safety of nutritional mixtures were released, the Future Group suddenly announced that its industries would withdraw from Europe, lay off 315,000 employees, and only retain 2 offices in France and Germany to deal with legal legacy issues. After receiving this news, the European Commission, which was in a meeting to discuss how to attack the Future Group next, suddenly became quiet. The commissioners looked at each other, opened their mouths, and no one said a word for a long time. Sitting at the head of the conference table, Juncker, the current president of the European Commission, pondered for a long time, holding a pen and tapping the notebook, breaking the silence at the conference table. Do we need to continue the discussion? Layoffs? 320,000? Are they crazy? The commissioner from Germany was incredulous about the news. After all, 1/3 of the employees of Future Group are concentrated in Germany. If this news is true, then just a second ago, Germany has added another 100,000 unemployed vagrants. It seems that they are true. The French commissioner looked at his watch, then closed the pen cap and notebook. It seems that the meeting can be ended early. We won. Future Group ran away from Europe with its tail between its legs. Thank God, this job is finally over. He also faced a lot of pressure when he voted in favor of a series of investigations on Future Group. People are not as easy to fool as they seem. The series of measures taken by the European Commission clearly have a strong local protectionist color. Perhaps entrepreneurs are happy to see that there is one less competitor, but in the eyes of the public who have a good impression of the Future Group, this behavior is not as popular as when they investigated China's photovoltaic companies. After all, ordinary people do not come into contact with photovoltaic equipment every day, but they will definitely use Future mobile phones and the world's only neural access device, the Phantom helmet, every day. Even if this is the instruction of the Freemasons, it is the voting committee members and the government behind each committee member who voted in favor that need to withstand the pressure of public opinion. Then the meeting is dissolved. The commissioners of various countries left the meeting one after another. Although they won, For some reason, no one had a happy expression on their faces. When leaving the venue, the German Commissioner Flammen made two calls, one to the president and the other to his old friend in the Freemasons. When he returns to Germany, I'm afraid he will be busy. Although it is true that he won, Flammen always has the illusion of being defeated. It must be an illusion. Chapter 825 Win or Lose. The news that the Popular Future Group suffered a setback in the European Union has caused a huge uproar in the international community. Wall Street investors have even prepared to take over Future Group's assets in Europe, but Future Group's next choice is beyond everyone's expectations. More than 300,000 employees were directly laid off, all businesses except Future Bank were suspended, and more than 10,000 employees were issued work visas to Singapore. As for the real estate under the name of Future Group and the patents coveted by major companies, Future Group has no intention of selling them. It is obvious that Future Group has not given up its ambition to return to Europe, but has only made a strategic retreat. Some analysts estimate that the direct economic losses caused to Future Group by the EU's sudden change in attitude towards Future Group at the end of June are as high as $11.3 billion. However, in contrast, the price paid by the EU to drive all Future Group products out of the market is also quite amazing. The solid-state lithium-ion batteries produced by Future Heavy Industry are far stronger than those of large automakers such as Daimler Group, Volkswagen, and Renault in terms of cost and performance. That is why Future Heavy Industry occupies almost 70% of the market share in the European market for pure electric vehicle batteries. However, now, Future Heavy Industry's products are no longer exported to the EU. Those who lost their jobs for this reason are not just those laid off by Jiang Chen. Many factories involved in the production of electric vehicles are facing a serious problem. Should they leave, or stay and find alternatives? Including Lucas Automobile Company, which Jiang Chen holds a controlling stake in. Many small and medium-sized automobile manufacturers have chosen to relocate their factories to the UK, which has already left the EU, or to countries such as Switzerland and Norway, that are close to the European market, but not within the European market. In European countries outside the 27 member states, Future Group's business is still operating normally, although this market is not much better than chicken ribs. On the surface, Future Group is already at a disadvantage in the confrontation with Freemasonry on the European continent. However, in confrontations in other regions, Future Group has performed evenly and even has a slight advantage. In the North American and South American markets, due to the protection of the WASP consortium, the impact of the Jewish consortium on the Future Group's industry is not too great. Asia has always been a place where the Freemasons are weak. The Freemasons' development in China is so weak that it can't even be on the stage, not to mention that the Liu family is watching. As for Southeast Asia, the Freemasons only have one strategic fulcrum left. That is the Philippines, which is eager to rise by relying on powerful forces. While the Freemasons launched their offensive, Jiang Chen was not idle either. Arrowhead Company became a rat crossing the street in Madagascar. Starring Trade contacted the Madagascar Congress and the opposition Liberal Party and launched an impeachment against the current president Rajoelina, accusing him of incompetence during his administration and condoning Arrowhead Company's collusion with black forces and even secretly possessing nuclear weapons. This argument is simply impeccable. No matter how Rajoelina gave a speech and appeased the demonstrators who were out of control, he could not whitewash himself and Arrowhead Company. In the War of Public Opinion, starring Trade found the firefighter who entered the forest farm on the night of the incident and contracted cancer due to inhaling excessive radioactive dust. At a cost of $10,000, they filmed a tear-jerking documentary. Lying on the hospital bed, the dying black guy spoke in a broken tone about what happened that night. At that time, we received an order to go to the fire scene for support. My brother and I thought it was just an ordinary forest fire. It was not, until we arrived at the scene, that we realized the seriousness of the problem. It was not the police who surrounded the scene, but the army. There were helicopters in the sky, but they were not the kind used for firefighting, but military helicopters. Although I had doubts about the details of the mission, orders were orders. At the urging of our superiors, we put on chemical protective suits and carried equipment into the fire scene. The fire was put out smoothly, but the further we went, the more I felt that something was wrong. This was not like an ordinary forest fire. The whole forest seemed to have been ravaged by a storm. Just then, Jamie suddenly asked me, "Hey, man, do you think the air smells a bit sweet, like rust?" I didn't know what it meant at the time, and I was still laughing and joking with him. Until later. At this point, the black guy was already sobbing, inhaling excessive amounts of radioactive dust, to the point where you can smell rust is almost enough to declare a person dead. There were a total of 1,000 firefighters who entered the forest to put out the fire, and half of them died within half a month. Those who survived were basically hospitalized and could no longer live like normal people. This documentary was placed on the front page of the Future Man 1.0 news panel, and soon after, the photo of the black guy lying on the hospital bed dying appeared on the signs held by the protesters. Under pressure from the boiling public opinion, President Rajoelina voluntarily announced his resignation before the impeachment of Congress took effect, and Madagascar will hold early elections. At this time, the Liberal Party supported by Starring Trade stood in front of the public. Facing the voters who supported him, leader Sanguini counted on his fingers everything that Arrowhead Company brought to Madagascar Island and put forward his own campaign platform. "Look at what the Americans have done in our homeland. Poverty, violence, crime, war, and now nuclear bombs. I don't care what deals Rajoelina made with those rich people. Now I say no." From the cheers at each speech and the results of the polls, it is almost certain that the Liberal Party will become the ruling party in Madagascar. When he comes to power, he will abolish all contracts between Madagascar and Arrowhead Company and completely remove this stink from the southern tip of Africa. When the situation stabilizes, Starring Trade will replace Arrowhead Company and become the new military contractor stationed in Madagascar. This poor island is rich in minerals such as chromium, graphite, bauxite, mica, nickel, and silicon carbide. As the World Gem Museum and the third largest country in the world in terms of crystal reserves, Madagascar is also known as a treasure island. Its resources are quite attractive to future heavy industry, especially silicon carbide, which is one of the industrial raw materials for the production of some graphene materials, and it is also a relatively scarce mineral in Mindanao and Papua. Of course, these reasons are only secondary. Jiang Chen's main purpose is to completely remove the power of Arrowhead Company and Freemasonry from this island. In retaliation for the hostile behavior of Freemasonry against Future Group in Europe, and to cut off its source of troops from Madagascar. It can only be said that in this first round of confrontation, both sides won and lost. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.